Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 6 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as the legendary Orochimaru with the Mad Scientist System. Let the tale begin. Chapter 101, Orochimaru couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. He had been right. The little girl standing before him, Yakushi Nono, was none other than the future director of the orphanage who would go on to raise Kabuto Yakushi, one of Orochimaru's most brilliant and loyal subordinates. Known as the Wandering Miko, Nono would eventually become an expert spy and a highly skilled medical ninja. Seeing her at this age gave Orochimaru an idea. Perhaps, instead of waiting for Kabuto to come into the picture, why not start earlier and groom Nono as his assistant? Orochimaru nodded to himself thoughtfully. He had considered countless individuals to become his assistant. Among them, Tsunade had always been the most fitting candidate. She had the strongest medical expertise, a deep knowledge of poisons and antidotes, and the ability to heal even the most fatal injuries. She was, in many ways, the perfect assistant. But she had one fatal flaw: her loyalty to Konoha and her bloodline as a member of the Senju clan. Tsunade would never betray Konoha, not even for him. If Orochimaru ever became an enemy of the village or was forced to conduct more extreme experiments, she would undoubtedly be the first to stand against him. And that was something Orochimaru couldn't afford. Nono, on the other hand, was still young, impressionable, and full of potential. She was already en route, being trained in the art of espionage, and showed early signs of medical proficiency. If he could mold her from this young age, she might become the perfect assistant, loyal only to him. Maybe it's time to give this a try, Orochimaru thought to himself as he observed the girl. At the moment, Yakushi Nono was just a 4 or 5-year-old child. An orphan picked up by Danzo for her unique talents and brought to Root for training. She was still adjusting to her new life, looking around with innocent curiosity. Orochimaru noticed her staring at him with wide eyes, wondering who this unfamiliar man was. Unlike the others en route, who wore the standard armor and masks, Orochimaru was dressed like a normal chunin, which made her all the more intrigued. Who is this person? Nono thought. He's not dressed like the others here. He must be important if he's walking around with Danzo-sama. She had only been here for a short time, but she understood the hierarchy well. Danzo and his subordinates were the silent protectors of Konoha, operating from the shadows. The Root ninjas were elite, always masked and armored. Yet here was Orochimaru, walking freely without any of the standard Root attire, alongside Danzo, the leader of Root himself. That meant something. Danzo, noticing Orochimaru's momentary silence, asked, "What's wrong? Did you want to pick the little girl as your opponent?" Orochimaru snapped out of his thoughts. "Of course not," he said with a faint smile. You, and the others I picked earlier, come at me together." "Together?" Danzo raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" The ninjas under Danzo's command weren't ordinary. Every Root member was handpicked by Danzo himself, and even the weakest among them were elite chunin. Orochimaru had just called out 5 of them. Even if Orochimaru had the strength of a high-ranking ninja, it would still be difficult to handle all 5 at once. Orochimaru simply nodded. "I'm sure." Danzo, after receiving confirmation, gave the order. "Everyone else, clear the room. Those who were called, stay behind." The room quickly emptied, leaving Orochimaru and the 5 Root operatives. The 5 ninjas glanced at each other, unsure of what to make of the situation. Many of them looked down on Orochimaru. To them, he was simply the disciple of Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Hokage. None of them knew about his performance during the Chunin exams or his prowess in scientific research. They certainly didn't understand why Danzo was so keen on keeping Orochimaru close. There was a shared thought among the 5: why does Danzo-sama favor him so much? They didn't see Orochimaru as anything special, and now he was challenging 5 of them at once. They exchanged glances, silently asking if they should go all out. After all, they didn't want to accidentally harm someone Danzo clearly valued. Seeing their hesitation, Orochimaru smirked. "If you don't have the intent to kill, you won't stand a chance against me." That statement caused the root ninjas to stiffen. Is this guy for real? If Danzo-sama gives the order, I have no problem fighting you, another said, stepping forward. Danzo-sama, please permit us to engage fully, the female ninja added. Danzo looked at them, narrowing his eyes. He was in a tough spot. He couldn't let them hold back, or the sparring session would be pointless. But at the same time, if Orochimaru got seriously injured, it would set back all the progress he had made with him. After a moment's thought, he said, "Do your best, but control the severity of your attacks." With that, the root ninjas bowed and turned their full attention to Orochimaru. They had received the order. Now they could fight properly. They thought this battle would be easy, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Orochimaru didn't waste any time. The moment the match started, his movements were fluid and fast, almost unnaturally so. He's faster than expected. Careful, don't engage him head-on, one shouted. His strength is no joke. Before the root ninjas could regroup, Orochimaru acted. Summoning jutsu. Bang! A cloud of white smoke filled the room, and as it cleared, one of the ninjas found himself face to face with something moving at high speed too fast for him to react. Whoosh! A black shadow darted out of the smoke, striking him in the neck before he could defend himself. The shadow retreated just as quickly, leaving him stumbling back, clutching his neck in shock. A snake? The ninja couldn't believe it. He had been struck down by a snake, one summoned by Orochimaru, no less. And it wasn't just any snake, it was abnormally fast, faster than any summon he ever encountered. The other root ninjas froze in disbelief. What just happened? How could a snake take him out that easily? As they stood there in shock, the snake, now coiled around Orochimaru's waist, poked its head out and looked up at him, speaking in a voice full of flattery. Master, did I do a good job? Not only had the snake spoken, but it had expressed emotions. It was fawning over Orochimaru? This is insane. One of the root ninjas muttered under his breath, trying to make sense of what was happening. Chapter 102. There are many kinds of summoned beasts in the ninja world, but the ones capable of speech are generally of a higher rank. Normally, a talking summoning beast wouldn't be anything too surprising for a ninja. After all, Sarutobi Hiruzen's Monkey King, Enma, could both speak and express emotions. However, a snake known for being cold-blooded and expressionless, showing emotions while speaking? That was certainly something unusual. The root ninjas watching were visibly unsettled. It simply felt off. The snake, coiled around Orochimaru's waist, continued speaking, its voice surprisingly childlike. Thank you, Master. It's all because of your help that I've become so much faster. Orochimaru smiled at the flattery. Indeed, your speed has improved significantly, he said, casually stroking the snake's head. This snake, now named Yamana, inspired by Yamana no Orochi, the legendary eight-headed serpent in Japanese mythology, was no ordinary snake. Originally, it had been just a regular python. But after using 3 doses of Orochimaru's evolutionary fluid, it had shed its skin 3 times, each time becoming darker, smaller, and more powerful. What was once a thick flower python, the size of an adult's leg, had now evolved into something more dangerous, with its body as thick as Orochimaru's arm and its scales black as night. The root ninja who had been bitten by Yamana was starting to panic. His body was completely immobilized, and the bite was on a major artery. The black color of the snake, combined with the bite's location, sent his mind spiraling into thoughts of venom and impending death. His teammates, witnessing this, couldn't help but voice their concern. What's happening to Ryo? That snake, it looks deadly. Shouldn't you heal him? Even Danzo, usually composed, furrowed his brow. He had told his subordinates to control their attacks, but it seemed Orochimaru's snake had gone straight for a kill shot. Orochimaru, wasn't that a bit much? Biting an artery directly? Danzo questioned. Orochimaru waved it off with a smirk. Relax, Yamana's bite only paralyzes the body. He's not in any real danger. Paralysis? One of the other root ninjas raised an eyebrow in disbelief. That can't be right. Look at the snake's color, it's pitch black. That's a sign of poison. Ryo, who had been holding onto his neck in terror, realized there were no signs of poisoning. No blackened skin, no frothing at the mouth, just complete immobility. Danzo, who had been watching closely, knew Orochimaru wasn't one to lie or exaggerate. If Orochimaru said the snake's bite only caused paralysis, it was likely true. Orochimaru shrugged, clearly not bothered by the skepticism. "Well, if you don't want to believe me, why don't you come find out for yourselves," he said, gesturing toward Yamada. "But be careful. If Yamada gets you, you'll end up like Ryo." As he spoke, Orochimaru kicked Ryo lightly in the stomach, sending him flying across the room. Ryo landed with a heavy thud, powerless to break his fall. The rest of the root ninjas exchanged glances, now even more wary. It wasn't just Orochimaru they had to contend with, but also the snake, which was small enough to slither around unnoticed and quick enough to strike without warning. The battle continued, but within 3 minutes, all 5 root ninjas found themselves bitten by Yamada. Each one experienced the same paralyzing effect, their bodies betraying them as they collapsed to the ground, unable to move. One of the ninjas, struggling to speak through the paralysis, managed to whisper, This isn't poison. It's like a body-binding technique?" A realization dawned on the group. The snake wasn't using venom, but something far more insidious, a jutsu similar to the body-binding technique, a skill typically used by elite ANBU or those skilled in Jinjutsu. But this was coming from a snake. Orochimaru looked down at Yamada, who had slithered back onto his shoulder. Indeed. Yamada has evolved to develop a form of spiritual power. When it bites, it injects spiritual energy that immobilizes the target, much like a Jinjutsu. The root ninjas were stunned. A snake capable of performing something akin to a body-binding technique? This was no ordinary summoning beast. Danzo, observing from the sidelines, now understood just how deep Orochimaru's research had gone. Orochimaru wasn't just experimenting with ninja techniques, he was pushing the boundaries of nature itself, evolving creatures into something far beyond their original form. Why not make it more aggressive? You could have developed a neurotoxin or something more lethal, one of the root ninjas asked, trying to mask his disbelief. Orochimaru smirked. Because a living enemy is more useful than a dead one. Capturing an opponent alive opens more possibilities. This had always been Orochimaru's philosophy. Dead subjects had limited utility. The living, on the other hand, could be experimented on, interrogated, and used in future research. Immobilizing them without killing them was far more valuable. Orochimaru surveyed the 5 fallen root operatives with a bored expression. "I had hoped one of you would show me something interesting, but it seems I overestimated you. Common ninjutsu, basic elemental techniques, nothing noteworthy at all." Chapter 103, Yakushi Nono, you're someone to reach out to, but not just yet. Right now, Nono was too young and inexperienced to be of any use. Orochimaru decided it would be best to let Danzo mold her a little first. When the time came, he could step in and take her under his wing, already shaped and prepared, without having to waste time cultivating her himself. After leaving the root training room, Orochimaru noticed the other ninjas exchanging confused glances. They couldn't figure him out. Why did he just leave after the sparring match without a word? It seemed strange, but one thing was clear, Orochimaru's strength had surprised them. Defeating 5 of them, even with the help of Yamada, wasn't something they had expected. They had grossly underestimated him, and it had cost them. As for Nono, she was still puzzled. The young man who had just fought them looked so much younger than many of the elite ninjas at Root, yet his skills were clearly on another level. And why didn't he wear a mask like the rest of them? It was strange, really strange. But Orochimaru didn't dwell on this. After leaving Root, he returned to his home, his mind already racing with thoughts. It only took him one night to make a decision. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. Even if it meant using up more resources, he needed to move forward. The idea was simple: find a ninja to clone. The person didn't have to be special, just suitable for the experiment. But whoever it was couldn't be from Konoha. The last thing Orochimaru needed was for someone to recognize the clone and start asking questions. That would lead to complications. With that in mind, Orochimaru went to the Hokage's office early the next morning. He wanted to take on a mission that dealt with rogue ninjas. His plan was to capture one of them, strengthen their genes, and start experimenting right away. But after thinking it over, he realized a flaw in his plan. Tsunade and Jiraiya would likely join him on the mission. If they were with him, how could he discreetly kidnap someone for his experiment? That would be difficult to explain, especially if they found out. After weighing his options, he decided to abandon the mission and turn to Danzo instead. A few more days passed. Orochimaru spent that time in his lab, finalizing the details of his plan before heading back to Root. When he arrived, he approached Danzo directly. The cell transplantation technology is almost ready. But I need a living subject to test on, Orochimaru said bluntly. Danzo's face lit up with satisfaction. That's excellent news, he said. We've captured a few rogue ninjas recently. You can use one of them for your experiment. Orochimaru was slightly taken aback. If he had known this earlier, he wouldn't have wasted so much time. It seemed that Danzo, ever the planner, had anticipated this need long before. Capturing ninjas alive was no easy task, given that many would rather die than be taken prisoner. But Danzo had his ways, and it wasn't surprising that he managed to capture a few. He led Orochimaru down a dark, narrow corridor within the Root headquarters. At the end of the hallway was a wooden door. Danzo pushed it open, revealing several small cells inside. This area was typically used to detain Root ninjas who had disobeyed orders, but now it served as a temporary holding area for the rogue ninjas they had captured. There were only 3 prisoners. They looked half dead, lying weakly on the ground, their bodies beaten and broken. To prevent them from using ninjutsu, Danzo had ordered that their right hands be cut off, making it impossible for them to form hand signs. These men have been here for a while, Danzo said in a matter-of-fact tone, as though discussing the weather. If you hadn't come soon, they wouldn't have lasted much longer. Orochimaru glanced at the prisoners. They were in terrible condition, half-starved, missing limbs, and shackled. It was clear they had no hope of escape. Why not just use a chakra sealing technique? Orochimaru asked casually. Cutting off their hands seems a bit crude. Danzo shook his head. Konoha isn't proficient in sealing techniques. Aside from the Hyuga clan's gentle fist, there's not much we can do to restrict chakra like that. Orochimaru nodded in understanding. Most sealing techniques came from the Uzumaki clan, and with the clan's decline, such techniques had become rare. Naturally, Danzo wouldn't go asking Uzumaki Mito for help. He turned his attention back to the prisoners. What kind of abilities do they have? Danzo pointed to each in turn. The man on the left is more of a brute, strong, but not much else. The one in the middle uses Jinjutsu, and the boy on the right can absorb chakra. Absorb chakra? Orochimaru's interest piqued. As in, he can drain it from others and use it for himself? Danzo nodded. That's right. Then I'll take him, Orochimaru said decisively. Chakra absorption wasn't an extremely rare ability, but it was certainly useful. Orochimaru remembered 2 individuals from his own ranks who had this power in the original timeline. One was Jirobo from the Sound 4, and the other was a minor character, Yoroi Kato. Even powerful figures like Kisame and Pain had variations of this ability. While it wasn't a groundbreaking talent, it had its uses, especially in situations where chakra management was critical. Danzo, however, had concerns. Orochimaru, many of the strong ninjas we've captured in the past couldn't withstand the power of the first Hokage's cells. This boy might not be strong enough either. It doesn't matter, Orochimaru replied calmly. These early tests are bound to fail. It's all part of the process. Besides, this is cloning, not cell transplantation. The physical strength of the subject is less important. Danzo seemed reassured by this logic and signaled to his subordinates to bring the boy out. The prisoner, a young man in his early 20s, was dragged from the cell. Despite his pale skin and handsome face, he looked half dead from hunger and blood loss. His missing arm had long since stopped bleeding, but his eyes were dull, showing the weight of his despair. Orochimaru didn't care about any of this. All he needed were the young man's cells. An hour later, the young man lay immobilized on an operating table in Orochimaru's secret lab. Danzo's men had left, leaving only Orochimaru and his soon-to-be experimental subject. The boy, seeing the syringe in Orochimaru's hand, was filled with fear. What are you going to do to me?" he stammered. Orochimaru glanced at him, slightly surprised that the boy still had enough strength to speak. "You're still conscious?" "Impressive," he said with a dark chuckle. "Why, you Konoha ninjas. I'll curse you to hell, you bastards." The boy spat, his voice weak but filled with venom. Before he could continue his curses, Orochimaru calmly injected him with the syringe, plunging the needle into the young man's artery. Within moments, the boy's body went limp, his consciousness slipping away as the anesthetic took effect. Chapter 104 Injecting anesthetic before the experiment was just basic protocol for Orochimaru. Once the subject was under, the next step was to administer the genetic repair fluid to restore his body to an optimal condition. The fact that the prisoner was unconscious and couldn't swallow wasn't a concern. Chakra could easily be used to guide the fluid down his throat. In this world, chakra had many applications, and this was just one of them. After the gene repair fluid had taken effect, Orochimaru followed it up with a dose of the genuine basic genetic enhancement fluid. Within 10 minutes, the young man's body began responding to the enhancements. Orochimaru calmly pushed the operating table over to the drainage area of his lab and, with a quick hand sign, summoned a stream of water using water release to clean the man thoroughly. Once the procedure was complete, he moved the subject into a secret chamber he had painstakingly built over the past 6 months. The chamber was hidden deep within the lab, so deep that not even Danzo knew about it. Orochimaru had used earth release techniques to carve it out himself. It wasn't a particularly large space, but it was well equipped and outfitted with 3 glass experimental capsules. These capsules were key to Orochimaru's cloning process, allowing him to grow and develop 3 clones at once. Konoha's current level of technology wasn't advanced enough for such an operation, but Orochimaru didn't rely on Konoha's technology. He had access to advanced, black market tech through his system, which provided everything from specialized equipment to silent power generators that ensured the lab stayed off the radar. Now came the crucial steps: wiping the subject's memory, implanting new memories, and adding the necessary skills. Orochimaru had already worked out a rough framework for the clone's abilities. He didn't want the clone to be too strong, as that could lead to potential issues with control. The plan was simple: the clone would have basic genetic enhancements, a diluted version of the first Hokage's cells, and a pair of 3 Tomo Sharingan. These abilities, combined with the clone's natural capacity to absorb chakra, would be sufficient for now. The diluted first Hokage cells weren't powerful enough to grant the clone access to would release or the rapid regenerative abilities that came with the original, but they would accelerate the clone's growth and enhance its physical durability. This, in conjunction with the genetic enhancement, would be more than enough to handle the Sharingan strain. For Orochimaru, the process of creating clones wasn't just about replication, it was about control. He needed soldiers, but not one so powerful that they could challenge him. The clone's skill set was designed to ensure it was competent, but never superior to Orochimaru himself. While Orochimaru was deep in his experiments, Hiruzen Sarutobi was busy scouring the land for the 2 rare medicinal herbs that Orochimaru had mentioned for the strengthening fluid. Unfortunately for Hiruzen, these ingredients didn't exist outside the system Orochimaru had access to. After nearly a year of fruitless searching, Hiruzen's efforts returned nothing. Time passed. At the beginning of Konoha Year 25, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade were all promoted to Jonin. But in Orochimaru's lab, the first batch of clones failed miserably. The problem lay in controlling the power of the first Hokage's cells, which still proved too volatile for stable cloning. By the start of Konoha year 26, Jiraiya had received a prophecy from the great Toad Sage, prompting him to leave the village in search of the child of prophecy. Orochimaru, however, remained focused on his research. Though his next round of cloning experiments succeeded in creating viable clones, the memory implantation process failed twice in a row, rendering the subjects useless. In Konoha year 27, Orochimaru finally achieved successful cloning and memory implantation, but ran into another hurdle. Fusing Uchiha genes into the clone failed, and the Sharingan wouldn't awaken. The experiments dragged on for 4 years. At the start of Konoha year 28, Orochimaru finally achieved his goal. He successfully created a perfect clone. Out of 3 subjects, only 1 survived the entire process. The others were ruthlessly discarded and buried, no longer of any use to him. This was the year Orochimaru turned 18. Master. The young man kneeled before him, his voice full of reverence. Inside the secret room of his hidden laboratory, Orochimaru looked down at the clone, finally allowing himself a breath of relief. While the actual cloning process itself wasn't too difficult, most of the work involved monitoring the subject and periodically replacing the nutrient solution. The constant failures had worn him down. But now, after years of effort, his creation knelt before him, a testament to his genius. "No need to call me master," Orochimaru said coolly. "You can just call me Lord." "Yes, Lord Orochimaru," the young man replied humbly. The clone stood at around 175 centimeters, with pale skin, black hair, and black eyes. His body was well built, with no signs of the physical trauma from the original subject. If one didn't look too closely, he could easily pass for a member of the Uchiha clan. "System, run a full diagnostic on him," Orochimaru ordered mentally. Analyzing. "Please wait." Physical condition, normal. Emotional state, stable. Heart rate, normal. Memory implantation, successful. Gene fusion, successful. Loyalty, 100%. A smile crept across Orochimaru's face. "Good. 100% loyalty. No matter how far you go, no matter what happens, you will never betray me, right?" "Of course, Lord Orochimaru. I will always serve you." Pleased, Orochimaru retrieved a scroll, unfurled it, and summoned a box of money. "Here. Take this 10 million ryo." The young man accepted the money without hesitation, bowing his head in respect. "Your code name will be Yoru, Night Shadow." "It suits you perfectly," Orochimaru said, already thinking about the tasks he would give his new creation. "Thank you, Lord Orochimaru," Yoru replied, his voice calm and obedient. "Take the money and head to the location I've marked in the Land of Sound. I want you to build a laboratory there. I'll inspect it in 3 months." Without a word, Yoru bowed and left the lab, fully prepared to carry out his orders. As Orochimaru watched him go, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Yoru wasn't just a clone, he was a perfect soldier, obedient to the core and armed with skills that would make him formidable but not threatening. Orochimaru had created him with enough intelligence to carry out tasks independently, though his thinking wasn't quite as flexible as a normal human's. That was intentional. Orochimaru didn't want him too independent. Satisfied with his success, Orochimaru turned his attention to the next step. His current technology was the advanced genetic enhancement fluid, but the system had already revealed the next technology he could unlock: artificial human technology. The creation of artificial humans would be far more complex than simple cloning, but Orochimaru wasn't in a rush. As soon as Yoru's lab was complete, his research would progress much faster. Looking up at the full moon outside his lab window, Orochimaru allowed himself a moment of reflection. After that first experiment with the rogue ninja years ago, he had staged a failed experiment in front of Danzo, ensuring that Danzo believed the first Hokage's cells were too powerful for anyone to withstand. The subject had died, just as Orochimaru had planned, leaving Danzo none the wiser about his true progress. "It seems I've become the very type of person I used to despise," Orochimaru muttered to himself, chuckling softly. But guilt? No, there was none. He had long since shed any qualms about morality. After all, they were just a few rogue ninjas, nothing more. In Orochimaru's eyes, a swift death was preferable to a life of endless suffering. With that thought, he tucked his hands into his pockets and began making his way back to Konoha. Chapter 105. Half a month later, on a deserted mountaintop outside Konoha, a man with long, black flowing hair stood silently, his gaze fixed on a small sapling before him. Orochimaru observed it carefully, lost in thought. After a moment, he raised his pale, slender hands, and clapped them together with a decisive snap. Would release. The sapling responded to the chakra flowing from Orochimaru's hands, rapidly growing and expanding until it stood as a small tree. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, extended his right hand, and with a flick of his wrist, space seemed to ripple as a gleaming silver sword materialized in his grip, the Kusanagi sword. With a swift, precise motion, the sword sliced cleanly through the tree, cutting it in half. Orochimaru nodded thoughtfully, lowering the blade. Just as I suspected. The quality of the wood release is decent, but without proper technique, it's limited. If I want to use true wood release ninjutsu, I'll need a wood release scroll. Yes, the man contemplating his own power was none other than Orochimaru. He had been delving deeper into his research over the past few months. Due to the advanced genetic enhancement liquid being an extension of the basic and intermediate versions, he had made quick progress, only taking about half a month to achieve this state. After using the advanced enhancement fluid, his body had reached a peak condition, practically perfect. With the genes of the first Hokage successfully fused into his body, Orochimaru now possessed a version of the legendary Sage Body. The Sage Body gave him chakra reserves on par with the tailed beasts and a regenerative ability that was extraordinary. Wood release, the bloodline ability of the first Hokage, was now part of his arsenal. But Orochimaru had an additional edge, the Sharingan, something the first Hokage never had. However, despite his advancements, Orochimaru knew he was still far from matching the true power of the first Hokage. The difference? Mastery over advanced would release ninjutsu and Sage Mode. Sage Mode was, for the moment, out of his reach. Orochimaru hadn't yet located Ryuchi Cave, the home of the White Snake Sage and the key to learning Senjutsu. But he wasn't worried, it was only a matter of time before he tracked it down. For now, his focus was on learning and mastering would release techniques. Ninjutsu wasn't something that could simply be accessed by possessing a chakra nature or even a powerful bloodline limit like would release. To truly wield these abilities, Orochimaru needed to either be taught the techniques or develop them himself. While he enjoyed developing his own jutsu, he wasn't foolish enough to ignore the value of learning pre-existing techniques. Before crafting his own would release abilities, Orochimaru needed to master the basics. He knew where to start. The original would release techniques developed by the first Hokage himself. Techniques like the Wooden Dragon, the Wood Human, or the Thousand-Armed Buddha, each one capable of overwhelming even the tailed beasts. But these techniques were tied to Sage Mode, which meant Orochimaru couldn't yet access their full power. For now, he would settle for mastering techniques like the Deep Forest Emergence or other basic would release abilities. He had heard that the necessary scrolls were in the possession of Danzo. That was his next destination. As Orochimaru leisurely strolled through the streets of Konoha, heading toward Danzo's headquarters, villagers greeted him with respectful nods and waves. "Good afternoon, Orochimaru-sama." "Hello, Orochimaru-sama." The greetings were courteous, as expected of civilians toward a respected jonin. Orochimaru returned their gestures with a casual nod. His promotion to jonin had significantly raised his status within the village. In the ninja world, the title of jonin carried weight, and respect followed naturally. Of course, achieving jonin status required more than just strength. One had to complete a certain number of high-level missions to earn the title. Orochimaru had done plenty of missions recently, but his personal research had occupied most of his time. Even so, the missions he did take on brought him not only the experience necessary for his promotion but also a fair amount of wealth. The money he earned helped fund his ongoing experiments, so it was well worth it. As he walked, Orochimaru's attention was suddenly drawn to a squad of Konoha darting across the rooftops. Their movements were quick and deliberate, heading toward the Hokage's office. Orochimaru's sharp eyes narrowed. Moving in such a rush? Something urgent must be happening. He stopped in his tracks, watching as more and more ninja emerged from the Hokage building and spread out across the village, heading toward the residences of various jonin and clan leaders. It wasn't long before one of the figures approached him directly. "Orochimaru-sama, the Hokage has summoned you," the masked Umbu said, bowing respectfully. "Understood," Orochimaru replied with a slight nod. He glanced around at the other ninja being summoned. It was clear that whatever this was, it involved nearly all of Konoha's top shinobi. This must be something serious. With that thought, Orochimaru turned and made his way toward the Hokage's office, his curiosity piqued. As he approached the building, he noticed Tsunade rushing out of her house, her usual confidence replaced with a rare look of concern. "Orochimaru," she called, jogging over to him. Orochimaru's expression remained calm as ever. "Seems something important is happening. Let's go together." Tsunade nodded, and the two headed to the Hokage's office side by side. The Hokage's conference room was packed. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat at the head of the long table, his face grim. Gathered around him were the heads of Konoha's major clans, along with high-ranking jonin and other prominent figures. Almost everyone was present: Ino Shikacho, Hyuga, Aburame, and Izuka. Even Tsunade and Orochimaru were there. The only person missing was Jiraiya, who was off training or chasing his latest prophecy. The room buzzed with tension. The urgency of the meeting was palpable, and the whispers among the shinobi were filled with speculation. "Hokage-sama, what's going on? It's been a long time since we've been called like this. Something serious must have happened." "Quiet!" Hiruzen's commanding voice cut through the room. "Now that everyone is here, let's begin." The third Hokage took a deep breath before speaking, his expression dark. "I've just received word. The village of Uzushio, the home of the Uzumaki clan, was destroyed overnight." There was a collective gasp. "What? Uzushio? Destroyed? How is that possible?" The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Uzushio had been one of Konoha's strongest allies, home to the powerful Uzumaki clan, known for their sealing techniques and vitality. The Uzumaki were closely tied to Konoha through the marriage of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, and Uzumaki Mito. The destruction of their village was unthinkable. Even Orochimaru, who had long expected this news, couldn't help but feel a flicker of surprise. So, it finally happened. The destruction of Uzushio had been an event etched in history, but hearing it in real time still caught him off guard. The island nation of Uzushio, located east of the Land of Fire, had always been strategically difficult to protect. Any large-scale invasion would take time, giving Konoha no chance to mobilize in time to save them. But the timing of this attack still felt strange. Why now? As the whispers continued to fill the room, Orochimaru's sharp mind raced, analyzing the situation. He glanced up at Hiruzen, a thought forming in his mind. Could this have been influenced by the third Hokage himself? Chapter 106, Uzushio, the territory of the renowned Uzumaki clan. This was the birthplace of Uzumaki Kushina, the future mother of Naruto, the protagonist of the original story. The Uzumaki clan was known for their powerful sealing techniques and long lifespans, and their village, Uzushio, was located in the Land of Whirlpools, east of the Land of Fire. Although the Land of Whirlpools was small, the Uzumaki clan's mastery of sealing techniques was unparalleled, to the point that it could be said the entire ninja world coveted their knowledge. It was precisely for this reason that Uzushio became a target. Orochimaru's thoughts quickly turned to the cause of Uzushio's destruction. While many might suspect that Konoha had a hand in it, fearing the strength of the Uzumaki clan sealing techniques, Orochimaru thought otherwise. He believed it wasn't Konoha's doing, but rather the result of the third Hokage's philosophy, his emphasis on peace and non-aggression. Some might argue that Konoha could have conspired with other nations to destroy Uzushio, afraid that the sealing techniques of the Uzumaki clan could one day threaten their own village. But Orochimaru dismissed this idea as nonsense. Why would Konoha, the closest ally of the Uzumaki, seek to destroy them when they freely shared their techniques with Konoha? Uzumaki Mito, the wife of the first Hokage and the former Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, was still alive in Konoha. No one in their right mind would dare attack the Uzumaki with such close ties to Konoha. Furthermore, the Uzumaki clan sealing techniques, while powerful, were not enough to pose a direct combat threat to Konoha. The Uzumaki were few in number, and no matter how advanced their techniques, they couldn't stand against Konoha's overwhelming military strength. In the end, Orochimaru concluded that the destruction of Uzushio was not directly Konoha's doing but was ultimately linked to the third Hokage's leadership. The desire for peace that Hiruzen promoted had made Konoha appear weak in the eyes of other nations, emboldening them to act without fear of retaliation. The Uzumaki clan sealing techniques were coveted by many, and as long as the first and second Hokage were alive, no one dared make a move. However, after the death of the first Hokage, things began to change. The second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, was still powerful enough to keep other nations in check, but after his death, and with Hiruzen's softer stance, the world began to see Konoha as vulnerable. Other nations took the opportunity to target Uzushio, knowing Konoha's focus on peace would prevent an immediate response. Orochimaru recalled the eventual Konoha-Wagakure conflict, where Konoha gave up compensation in the name of peace. It was this kind of thinking that allowed enemies to grow bolder, leading to heavier losses for Konoha in the long run. The destruction of Uzushio was just another example of the consequences of this peace-driven policy. Back in the Hokage's conference room, the atmosphere was tense. The assembled Jonin and clan leaders were deeply concerned about the news. It's too late to save them now, but we cannot allow this to go unanswered, Hiruzen said, his voice carrying a rare tone of severity. We will investigate thoroughly, and those responsible will be brought to justice. The room erupted in agreement, with many of the clan heads and Jonin voicing their support. Yes, we must find out who is behind this. The Uzumaki clan deserves justice. Hokage-sama, give the order, and we will move. Hiruzen nodded, seeing the urgency in their eyes. The Uzumaki clan's destruction had shaken the village, and now was the time to act. Orochimaru, Tsunade, Hiruzen addressed them once the meeting had dispersed. The two of you will form one of the investigation teams. I'll make sure Jiraiya is informed when we locate him. Understood, Orochimaru replied calmly, while Tsunade nodded. They were tasked with investigating what had happened to Uzushio and discovering which nations or forces had been involved in its destruction. As they left the Hokage's office and headed toward the village gates, Tsunade couldn't help but express her concern about Jiraiya. That idiot Jiraiya's been off chasing this so-called prophecy for 2 years now. No one's heard from him. Do you think he's okay? Despite her harsh words, the worry in her voice was unmistakable. Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade had been teammates for years, and despite their differences, there was a deep bond between them. Orochimaru, however, remained nonchalant. Jiraiya won't die so easily, he said. I wouldn't worry. Orochimaru had long stopped worrying about Jiraiya. In both the world he knew from his memories and this world, Jiraiya was anything but weak. He always had a way of surviving, no matter how dire the situation. Orochimaru's thoughts, however, drifted to something else, the looming threat of the Second Shinobi War. From what he remembered, the war was fast approaching. While he had relied on his own intuition to navigate life in this world, he couldn't help but use his memories as a guide for major events. The thought of the impending war flashed through his mind briefly, but Orochimaru quickly dismissed it. His strength had grown significantly in recent years, and a war would merely be another test of his abilities. That evening, as Orochimaru and Tsunade prepared to leave Konoha for their mission, an Umbu operative quietly brought a young red-haired girl to the village gates. The girl looked scared and uncertain, but the Umbu led her toward the Hokage's office with a firm grip on her hand. Hokage-sama, my apologies. I was only able to save this one child with a special constitution, the Umbu agent said, half kneeling before Sarutobi Hiruzen. The third Hokage narrowed his eyes, a deep sadness flickering in them. Only this one? Yes, the Umbu agent replied, bowing his head. The situation was too chaotic, and this was all I could do. I see, Sarutobi sighed. You did what you could. I don't blame you for this. He glanced at the frightened girl before turning to one of his aides. Take her to Lady Mito. Let her stay with her for now. Yes, Hokage-sama, the aide replied, gently guiding the young girl away. As the girl was led out, Sarutobi looked out the window of his office, deep in thought. Chapter 107, the Uzumaki clan, descendants of Azura and distant relatives of the Senju, held a special place in Konoha. Their exceptional vitality, massive chakra reserves, and powerful sealing techniques allowed them to suppress tailed beasts, making them a vital ally to the village. Konoha, knowing the importance of the Uzumaki clan, had always sent shinobi to secretly protect them. One of the last survivors, Uzumaki Kushina, witnessed the destruction of her homeland with her own eyes. Because of her special constitution and Konoha's plans for her to become the next Jinchuriki, Kushina was brought back to Konoha after the tragedy. A Jinchuriki, as Orochimaru well knew, was a person who served as a vessel for a tailed beast, containing its chakra. Kushina's status as the Jinchuriki for the Nine Tails was top secret, known only to Konoha's highest officials and a few elite Umbu tasked with her protection. Not even the Sannin, including Orochimaru, were aware of her true purpose. But now, after years of delving into Konoha's hidden secrets, there was little that escaped Orochimaru's notice. In Uzushio, chaos reigned. Retreat! Retreat now! Ha ha ha, don't rush, we've looted enough. We've gained plenty of resources here. Even as a minor country, Uzushio still had much to offer. We need to leave now. Konoha's reinforcements will be here any moment. What? Konoha? Retreat! Ninja after ninja fled from the crumbling walls of Uzushio, their retreat swift as they headed toward the eastern docks of the Land of Whirlpools. But on the western shores, 3 large ships approached the island. On board were 24 elite Konoha Jonin, most of whom had once been classmates of Orochimaru from their Chunin days. Hatake Sakumo wasn't present, but the Uchiha clan had sent one of its own, Uchiha Retsu. Lord Orochimaru, Nara Shikafu, one of the Jonin, spoke calmly. There are several foreign ninjas on the island. We've spotted them through reconnaissance. Despite being a Jonin now, Shikafu still vividly remembered Orochimaru's terrifying performance during their Chunin exams. The memory of how Orochimaru's team had dominated the Forest of Death was forever etched in his mind. Out of respect, he always addressed him as Lord Orochimaru. Is that so? Orochimaru replied nonchalantly, taking the monocular telescope from Shikafu and peering toward the shores of the Land of Whirlpools. Sure enough, there were several enemy ninjas keeping watch. There are indeed quite a few, Orochimaru said, lowering the telescope. What should we do? Shikafu asked, waiting for instructions. Orochimaru smiled slightly, his voice calm but sharp. Abandon the ship. We'll head straight for them. If they aren't wearing Uzushio headbands, kill them all. Understood. Shikafu nodded before turning to the others. Everyone, abandon ship. Attack the enemy directly. Yes, sir. The assembled Jonin echoed as they leaped from the ship, landing swiftly on the water. Chakra surged to the soles of their feet, allowing them to sprint across the waves toward the shores of Uzushio. Orochimaru and Tsunade were among them. Are we really killing all of them, Orochimaru? Tsunade asked, sounding a bit conflicted. Orochimaru chuckled, his eyes gleaming with a hint of amusement. Still soft, Tsunade? These are enemies who've invaded and destroyed an allied village. Do you really expect mercy? Tsunade fell silent. Despite her strength, she had never experienced the brutality of war on a large scale. Aside from the few skirmishes Hiruzen had taken her to, she had been shielded from the true horrors of battle. Now, Witnessing Konoha preparing to execute foreign invaders without hesitation, she felt a flicker of doubt. But the battle had already begun. Damn it, Konoha's forces are here already. Hold them off. We need to buy time for the others to retreat. You're all going to die here, Konoha. The foreign invaders clashed with Konoha's elite jonin. Fire, earth, and wind-based jutsu filled the air, the clashing forces igniting the land. Earth-style, stone shatter. One of the invaders hurled an earth jutsu toward Uchiha, who dodged it effortlessly. He leaped into the air, drawing his sword with a gleaming arc. His blade met resistance as the enemy blocked with a kunai, but it wasn't long before Retsu gained the upper hand, disarming the foreign ninja with a swift strike. Elsewhere, Konoha's jonin were proving their superior strength. Many of them hailed from the great clans like the Uchiha, Hyuga, and Aburame, their bloodline abilities and clan techniques giving them an edge in battle. Coupled with their sheer numbers, the tide quickly turned in Konoha's favor. Orochimaru, however, walked leisurely through the battlefield, his demeanor calm amidst the chaos. "This is my chance," thought one of the invaders as he spotted Orochimaru's back turned to him. He flung 2 shurikens with deadly precision. Whoosh! Orochimaru casually sidestepped, not even turning to face the attacker. How did he dodge that without even looking? Does he have eyes in the back of his head? The enemy ninja thought, stunned. Before he could react further, he realized something was very wrong. He couldn't move his hands to form seals. Glancing down, he saw that a black python had silently coiled around his arm, its grip tight and unyielding. Orochimaru finally turned, his golden, snake-like eyes locking onto the invader. "Iwa Nin? No, you're not from Iwagakure." "W what?" "How can you tell?" the enemy stammered, confusion and fear flooding his voice. His headband and uniform were perfect replicas of Iwagakure's, and his ninjutsu even mimicked the techniques used by Iwa shinobi. How had Orochimaru seen through it? Orochimaru smirked. "The geology of Iwagakure tends to breed hardier shinobi. Your frame is far too thin to be from there, and your skin, it's far too pale. You're clearly from a small, weaker nation. You disguised yourselves as Iwa Nin to escape retaliation." The invader was completely taken aback. Who was this man, to deduce their plan so effortlessly? Unfortunately for him, he had no time to ponder further as Orochimaru's black snake, Yamada, sank its fangs into his neck, injecting its paralytic venom. "Yamanaka Yanichi," Orochimaru called over to one of his teammates, "take this one for interrogation." "Yes, Lord Orochimaru," Yanichi replied, moving toward the immobilized man. Before they could act, another enemy ninja hurled 2 kunai with explosive tags attached directly at them. "Don't even think about it," the enemy shouted. Boom! The explosion went off, killing the paralyzed ninja instantly. Orochimaru leaped back, avoiding the blast with ease, his face remaining impassive as the smoke cleared. "Such a waste," Orochimaru muttered, watching the flames dissipate. Chapter 108. The explosion not only killed the Iwa ninja, but also sent Yamada flying back. "Damn it, what a waste!" Yamanaka Yanichi, who had rushed over, sighed with regret. Yanichi was a member of the Yamanaka clan, a group famous for their mind control and mental invasion techniques. They specialized in spiritual power, giving them the ability to probe an enemy's mind and extract valuable information. On the battlefield, this skill was especially useful for gathering intelligence. Orochimaru had captured the enemy alive specifically to give Yanichi a chance to explore his memories. Unfortunately, the enemy had self-destructed before that could happen. Still lacking battlefield experience, "I see," Orochimaru muttered, narrowing his eyes at the body of the Iwa ninja. Though his raw power was undeniable, he recognized that battle-hardened instincts were just as crucial. A brief lapse in vigilance had allowed another enemy to spot the situation and sacrifice himself to take out his comrade. It was a reminder that even he wasn't infallible. Shaking off the frustration, Orochimaru turned his attention to the larger situation. He glanced at the 2 remaining jounin who had slipped away earlier, then back at his own forces. Stick to the previous formation and sweep the area clean, he commanded. If you encounter an enemy you can't handle, use the signal flares. Understood. Shingo, Ryuichi, and Zen, let's head out. Woof. Yanichi, Kakue, sweep this area. Keep moving. The Konoha forces split into smaller teams of 3, leaving a few behind to guard the pier while the rest pushed deeper into the territory surrounding Uzushio. Orochimaru and Tsunade partnered up and made quick work of their section. Despite their swift movements, it was clear that they had arrived too late. Aside from the stragglers they had encountered earlier, there were very few enemies left. The once peaceful and vibrant Uzushio was now a devastated wasteland of ruins and debris. As Orochimaru and Tsunade entered the village proper, they were greeted only by the stench of death and the sight of bodies strewn across the streets. Whoever had attacked had long since fled. Orochimaru had witnessed such scenes before, yet there was still a certain weight to seeing so much destruction firsthand. War brought nothing but death. And in its wake, even a proud village like Uzushio had been reduced to rubble. Tsunade, however, was seeing this level of devastation for the first time. Her fists tightened, her heart filled with rage. Damn them, unforgivable. This is absolutely unforgivable, she spat through gritted teeth, barely able to contain her fury. But Orochimaru's response was cold, detached. It's already done. There's no point in getting worked up over it now. Where are we going? Tsunade asked, forcing herself to keep her emotions in check. Search for survivors, obviously, Orochimaru replied, already moving ahead. Even if the odds are slim, we might still find someone. Tsunade was momentarily silent, then followed behind him. She knew he was right, though it didn't make the situation any easier to bear. As they moved deeper into the village, it became clear that the attackers had been thorough. The few surviving structures had been razed, and most of the bodies were already cold. It was clear the invaders had systematically destroyed everything in their path. The Uzumaki clan sealing techniques were always too powerful, Orochimaru commented as they passed through what appeared to be an ancestral hall. The walls were engraved with intricate symbols and scripts, a testament to the clan's mastery of Fuinjutsu. No matter how strong you are, with seals like these, you'd be helpless against them. Yeah, if they weren't so unique, they probably wouldn't have been targeted like this, Tsunade muttered, her voice laced with bitterness. But she left the rest of her thoughts unsaid. The reality was harsh, sometimes being too powerful could bring destruction. They continued searching through the remnants of the village. The odds of finding any survivors seemed bleak, yet Orochimaru remained persistent. His thoughts turned to the future. He knew a few members of the Uzumaki clan had survived this massacre, Nagato's parents, and possibly Karen's mother. If he could find just one of them, it could prove invaluable. On a hill about a kilometer away from the village, Orochimaru knelt, examining the earth. There's moisture on the ground, and from the state of the village, it doesn't look like it rained here recently, he observed. Tsunade caught on quickly. You're thinking Kirigakure had a hand in this? It's possible, Orochimaru replied. But it's also likely those ninjas we encountered earlier were just opportunists, here to scavenge whatever they could. They probably weren't directly involved in the destruction of the village. Orochimaru gestured ahead. Look at the trees in the distance. Tsunade followed his gaze. The forest up ahead was completely mangled, trees were snapped, shredded, and the earth was deeply scarred from battles. These are traces of a large-scale fight, Tsunade murmured, fury building again as the extent of the destruction became more apparent. Damn it! Why were so many villages involved in this attack? Orochimaru simply smiled, his voice soft yet calculating. Why? Because the reward was worth the risk. The Uzumaki clan sealing techniques were known throughout the ninja world, and they had proven to be a powerful tool during the wars fought by the first and second Hokage. The fact that the village possessed such valuable knowledge had made them a target for years. Now that Konoha's leadership under Sarutobi Hiruzen was seen as less intimidating, the other villages had seized the opportunity to strike. As Tsunade's anger simmered, several Konoha Jonin appeared behind Orochimaru. Orochimaru-sama, what's the situation here? Anything noteworthy? Orochimaru shook his head. Not much to add. It's likely the major ninja villages, Suna, Iwa, Kiri, and Kumo were all involved in the attack. Those ninjas we encountered earlier were probably small-time raiders from minor countries. The Jonin looked grim. That lines up with what we found. If all 4 major villages are involved, this situation just got a lot more complicated. One of the Jonin stepped forward. We'll report this to Hokage-sama immediately and continue searching for survivors. You and Tsunade can do the same. Orochimaru nodded in agreement. Let's keep moving. As they walked away, Tsunade's thoughts churned. Orochimaru, do you really think this could have been avoided? She asked, her tone almost pleading. For now, this is inevitable, Orochimaru replied bluntly. The world isn't going to change because we wish for it. But you've thought of something, haven't you? A way to stop all this senseless killing? Tsunade pressed. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow. What makes you say that? Tsunade looked at him with conviction. My grandmother told me that your dream was always world peace. With your talent, I know you must have come up with a way by now. Orochimaru chuckled. World peace? That was a childish dream. You're lying. Tsunade shot back, her eyes searching his face for some hint of the truth. Believe whatever you want, Orochimaru said, turning his gaze ahead. Chapter 109, Orochimaru and Tsunade searched the ruins of the Uzumaki clan's village for days, hoping to find survivors. But in the end, their efforts yielded nothing. The attack had been carefully planned, executed with precision. The chance of anyone escaping was slim, and it would be nearly impossible to find survivors in the wreckage left behind. Anyone who had managed to flee would be long gone by now, hidden away or captured by those responsible. As they left the land of whirlpools empty-handed, Orochimaru found himself reflecting on the path his future self would take. In the original timeline, Orochimaru was known for taking in orphans and displaced people, giving them shelter and purpose in his Otogekure. To them, Orochimaru had been a savior, even if his ultimate aim was to experiment on their bloodlines and abilities. To these lost souls, he had been a lifeline in a world of chaos, which explained their fierce loyalty, even at the cost of their lives. Orochimaru shook his head, dispelling those thoughts as they returned to Konoha. The trip had been a failure, and it left a bitter taste. Back in Konoha, the news from the land of whirlpools weighed heavily on the third Hokage. The situation was far worse than anyone had expected. Under the leadership of the first Hokage, no one would have dared to strike against Konoha's allies. Even during the reign of the second Hokage, only Kumogakure had tried anything, and they had been repelled swiftly. But now, with Sarutobi Hiruzen in charge, the Uzumaki clan, one of Konoha's staunchest allies, had been wiped out. It was a blow not just to Konoha's pride, but to Hiruzen's own standing as Hokage. Hiruzen, it's time the other villages learned that Konoha is not to be trifled with, Danzo declared during a tense meeting in the Hokage's office. His expression was hard, his voice filled with urgency. The meeting room was packed with the leaders of Konoha's most prominent clans and influential figures. In a time like this, the village was divided into 2 clear factions, the Hawks and the Doves. Danzo, as always, represented the Hawks, those who believed in a show of strength, an aggressive stance to remind their enemies of Konoha's might. Hiruzen, on the other hand, led the Doves, those who favored peace, diplomacy, and restraint. The destruction of the Uzumaki clan and their village isn't just a tragedy. It's a direct challenge to Konoha's authority, Danzo continued. If we don't take action, if we let this slide, it will send a message to the other villages that Konoha can be pushed around. Sarutobi remained silent for a moment, his gaze heavy. He knew Danzo was right, this was a provocation, and if they didn't respond, it could embolden Konoha's enemies. But the situation wasn't so simple. We can't rush into war, Hiruzen said firmly. There are too many unknowns. Multiple villages were involved in this attack. If we act recklessly, we could end up facing a united front of enemies. Danzo's eyes flashed with irritation. Then what do you propose? Sit back and wait until they come for us next? Hiruzen shook his head. We need to negotiate first. The death of Uzumaki Mito is near. Without her presence, our leverage has already diminished. Konoha isn't in a position to wage a war right now. Danzo scowled, his fists clenching at his sides. You're being too cautious. With Mito-sama's health failing, now is the time to strike, before our enemies can consolidate their strength. We should attack one village first, show the others what happens when you challenge Konoha. That's enough, Danzo, Hiruzen cut in, his tone final. We will not start a war that will lead to unnecessary death and suffering for the people of the Land of Fire. We will negotiate. If talks fail, only then will we consider military action. Koharu Udatane and Hamura Mitokado, Sarutobi's longtime advisors, both nodded in agreement. Negotiation is the most logical first step, Koharu said. We must give diplomacy a chance. Hamura added, we can't afford a war right now, not when the village is still recovering from the previous conflict. We need to consider the long-term consequences. Danzo wanted to argue further, but he knew he was outnumbered. As much as he hated to admit it, he didn't have the authority to make decisions of this magnitude on his own. He could only advise, and for now, Hiruzen had the final say. Frustrated, Danzo fell silent, his mind already working on alternative plans. If Hiruzen wouldn't act, he would find a way to prepare Konoha for the inevitable conflict that was coming. Back at the root headquarters, Danzo's frustration boiled over. He struck the ground with his cane, causing cracks to spider out from where it struck. Damn that monkey! He's going to get us all killed with this weakness. Danzo growled, his voice echoing in the dimly lit room. He was so lost in his anger that he barely registered the familiar voice that called out to him from the doorway. What's got you so worked up today? Danzo turned to see Orochimaru leaning casually against the doorframe, a sly smile on his face. It was clear that Danzo's temper didn't faze him in the slightest. Humph. Who else but Hiruzen? Danzo replied bitterly. His reluctance to act is a sign of weakness. He doesn't realize that inaction will only embolden our enemies. Orochimaru chuckled. He had grown accustomed to Danzo's complaints about the third Hokage. Well, it's not like this is the first time you've disagreed with him. Danzo narrowed his eyes. Why are you here, Orochimaru? Do you need something from me? Orochimaru didn't bother with small talk. I remember you mentioned once that you had scrolls containing the first Hokages would release techniques. I've run into a bit of a roadblock in my research, and I think those scrolls might be able to help me. Danzo eyed him suspiciously. He knew how obsessed Orochimaru had become with genetic experiments, particularly with the first Hokage's cells. But ultimately, Danzo saw no harm in granting his request. After all, the would-release scrolls were useless to anyone who didn't have the genetic capacity to wield the technique. Fine, Danzo said after a moment, reaching into his robes and pulling out 2 scrolls. He tossed them to Orochimaru without hesitation. Take them. But don't lose them. Orochimaru caught the scrolls with ease, his smile widening. Don't worry. I'll return them once I've finished. As he turned to leave, Orochimaru paused. By the way, is Nono still around? Danzo raised an eyebrow at the mention of the young girl he had taken in. Nono? What do you need her for? Orochimaru shrugged. I could use an extra pair of hands in the lab. And she seems promising. Danzo gave him a stern look. Be careful, Orochimaru. As a shinobi, you shouldn't let emotions cloud your judgment. And don't forget, you have more important things to focus on than indulging in sentimentality. Chapter 110. Hearing Danzo's words, Orochimaru was momentarily silent. He understood this was how Danzo operated within Root. As a Root ninja, one was expected to have no name, no future, no emotions, only missions. Emotions were considered burdens, stumbling blocks on the path to success. But was having emotions really such a wrong path? Orochimaru smiled faintly. Don't worry, sir. Research always comes first for me. Good, good. Don't become like Hiruzen, indecisive and unfit to be Hokage at all. Danzo's voice held disdain as he mentioned Sarutobi yet again. It seemed like every conversation with Danzo inevitably led back to Hiruzen. At this point, he sounded like a bitter old woman, obsessively wishing for Hiruzen to step down so he could take the Hokage seat himself. Only Danzo knew what it felt like to harbor great ambitions but lack the opportunity to realize them. Where's Nono? Orochimaru was in no mood to entertain Danzo's grievances any longer. She should be in the dormitory area. That girl is quick with disguise techniques, sharp-minded, and stays calm under pressure. She'd make a better spy than an assistant. It doesn't matter. I'll teach her the basics for now. If there's time, I'll help her with more advanced training later. Is that so? Well, all right then. By the way, Orochimaru. Danzo called out just as Orochimaru was about to leave. Besides the combination of mental power and the first Hokage's cells, is there any other way? There is, but it's not suitable for someone like you. Orochimaru replied without looking back. So, what's your current success rate with this method? The technology is mature, and the success rate is around 100%. 100% success rate? How confident must Orochimaru be to claim that? Danzo already knew that the technique was advanced and well-practiced, but he wanted to use it on himself. Still, even with his ambition, Danzo was not yet brave enough to attempt something so dangerous without a safety net. The main issue was that Danzo lacked the Sharingan. The Sharingan, the Uchiha clan's bloodline limit, was crucial for controlling the first Hokage's cells. Without it, the chances of failure were high. And despite his influence, Danzo couldn't simply steal the eyes of the Uchiha without causing trouble. The Akugan from the Hyuga clan was another option, but it had its limitations and required taking the eyes from someone in the main family, a much more complicated task. Besides, the Hyuga clan's Byakugan, while valuable for reconnaissance, didn't compare to the potential of the Uchiha's Sharingan for Danzo's purposes. Especially since he coveted techniques like Izanagi from the Uchiha's forbidden jutsu. Forget it. Keep me updated when there's more news. Danzo waved him off, already turning his attention to something else. Orochimaru gave a small smile and left. There was no need to tell Danzo that he had discovered a way to induce the Sharingan in ordinary people using Uchiha genes. Though once the genes fused, their benefits for Orochimaru would diminish, this method could still produce countless Sharingan. Alternatively, after someone awakened the Sharingan, Orochimaru could use a cloning technique to replicate it, achieving the same result without draining the original eyes. To Orochimaru, something as rare as the Sharingan for others was a near-limitless resource for his experiments. At the Roots dormitory area where male and female ninjas were housed separately, Orochimaru strolled through freely, given the early hour. You're too weak. Do 200 more push-ups, and if you don't finish, you're not sleeping tonight. Why yes. Lon, isn't this too harsh? Harsh? If she wants to be a member of Root, she can't be soft like those outsiders. I'm doing this for her own good. I get that, but... There's no but. If you feel sorry for her, then you can do the push-ups for her. As Orochimaru neared, he overheard this conversation. He glanced inside the room to see a small girl, wearing glasses, struggling through her exercises. Sweat dripped from her forehead, soaking her brown hair. Two female ninjas sat nearby, one fully masked, the other with a scarred face watching her sternly. When they saw Orochimaru at the door, the masked one immediately stood up, her posture respectful. Lord Orochimaru. The scarred woman also jumped to her feet. Lord Orochimaru. Ignoring them, Orochimaru looked at the girl. What's going on here? Forget it. Nono, come with me. Huh? Nono hesitated, glancing nervously at the scarred woman. The scarred woman snapped, You heard Lord Orochimaru, didn't you? Why yes. Nono stood quickly, a look of unease on her face, and hurried to Orochimaru's side. She was puzzled why had Orochimaru come for her. But she didn't dare ask and simply followed him in silence. En route, Orochimaru's authority was second only to Danzo's, and his power was considered terrifying. The scarred woman who often bullied her had shown immediate respect, a clear sign of Orochimaru's influence. Nono knew all too well that only strength commanded respect here. That's why she had never spoken to Orochimaru directly before. She feared drawing attention to herself. The two left the root headquarters, and Orochimaru led her to his personal residence. Entering his home, Nono's curiosity deepened. What did he want from her? Sit. And no need, Lord Orochimaru. I am fine standing. Nanoyu stammered nervously. At just 9 years old, she had barely interacted with Orochimaru, and she couldn't guess what he was planning. The uncertainty made her anxious. Relax. I've no other reason for bringing you here, Orochimaru said calmly. I've heard you've started studying medical ninjutsu recently? Yes, Lord Orochimaru. How long have you been learning? A little over 2 months. Just 2 months? Orochimaru mused, then reached into a nearby drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. He handed them to her. Take this. Study it when you have time, and let me know when you understand it. This is... Nono flipped through the pages, confused. Before she could say anything, Orochimaru handed her a small vial of liquid. Take this, too. Chapter 111. When Nono returned to Root's accommodation area with a stack of documents and a bottle of genetic repair fluid, the scarred woman couldn't help but frown. A recovery potion? Didn't expect you'd catch Lord Orochimaru's attention, she muttered with a hint of jealousy. Another female ninja nearby was also visibly surprised. Unbelievable. After all, who is Orochimaru? He wasn't just the second in command under Danzo, he had a close relationship with him, and his strength was nothing short of extraordinary. Being favored by Orochimaru practically guaranteed a meteoric rise. The possibilities were endless. Why was Orochimaru considered so powerful? Not long ago, Orochimaru had made a habit of testing his skills against the root ninjas. These weren't mere sparring sessions each time it was 5-on-1, yet they never managed to beat him. Initially, Root's Jounin could handle most situations with just a couple of them working together, but now, when Orochimaru came around, no one below Jounin even thought of stepping up. This earned him the deep respect of the root ninjas. Beating 5 highly skilled Jounin simultaneously was no small feat. Even Danzo himself might struggle with that kind of odds. After Orochimaru was promoted to Jounin, they began to call him Lord with the same deference they showed to Danzo. It wasn't just the other female ninjas who were surprised by this, Nono herself was confused. She knew what a recovery potion was. It was a luxury in Konoha, nearly impossible to get even if you had the money. Officially, it sold for 60,000 ryo, but on the black market, it could go for as much as 200,000. That was enough to sustain an average family for a year. Yet Orochimaru had given it to her casually, as if it were nothing more than a greeting gift. This was clearly a show of goodwill, but why would someone like Orochimaru pay attention to her? En route, there were far more capable ninjas. Yakushi Nono couldn't make sense of it. Meanwhile, Orochimaru had already put Nono out of his mind. His attention was now fully on the wood-release scrolls in front of him. He had sealed the entire room and activated his Sharingan, scanning through the 2 scrolls carefully. Both the sealing and unsealing techniques were detailed clearly, and the Sharingan's ability to memorize everything perfectly was proving invaluable. The scrolls contained 4 wood-release jutsu. In addition to the deep forest emergence jutsu he had just examined, there were also a wood clone technique and one rather obscure-sounding technique with a strange name. Hokage-style 60-year-old technique, enclosed hermitage entering society with bliss-bringing hands. Orochimaru frowned. There was a character in the name he didn't recognize, but from the description, it seemed to be a technique that could manifest a Za symbol on the user's palm, capable of suppressing a tailed beast. With these would-release techniques as a foundation, developing more would be a straightforward task. Satisfied with what he had learned, Orochimaru closed his eyes, thinking about the possibilities. Though his proficiency in cell transplantation had reached an advanced level, the necessary materials weren't available, and Danzo was still biding his time. Meanwhile, Hiruzen was busy dealing with diplomatic negotiations between nations. The larger countries had no intention of acknowledging their involvement in the destruction of the land of whirlpools. They all denied responsibility. Evidence? Prove that we attacked the land of whirlpools. Those battle scars? You Konoha ninja can use Earth Release too, so why blame the land of Earth? And the land of water was no different. Water release techniques? Konoha has those too. What's that got to do with us? The other nations refused to admit guilt, and Konoha had little leverage without hard proof. Any attempt to formally dissolve peace treaties would lead to full-scale conflict, and no one was eager to start a war without absolute necessity. Tensions were high, but no country was willing to make the first move. War, after all, wasn't child's play, it would be bloody and costly. As for Orochimaru, he couldn't care less about the political tensions. If war came, he would fight; if not, he'd continue his research in peace. He was playing the long game, biding his time while everyone else squabbled. 3 months passed, and the situation between the nations only grew more strained. Finally, Orochimaru found an opportunity to request permission from Hiruzen to leave the village. His excuse? Searching for rare medicinal ingredients. Normally, given the volatile political climate, Hiruzen would have denied the request outright. But Orochimaru assured him that if war broke out, he would return immediately. After some deliberation, Hiruzen reluctantly agreed. Orochimaru-sensei, are you really leaving the village? Nawaki asked, disappointment clear in his voice as he watched Orochimaru pack his belongings. Now 8 years old, Nawaki had been apprenticed to Orochimaru for 2 years, largely because of his sister Tsunade's influence. When he heard that Orochimaru was leaving, he immediately dragged Tsunade along to confront him. Yes, Orochimaru replied calmly. But I shouldn't be gone for too long. Still. You really can't take me with you? Tsunade chimed in, sitting cross-legged on Orochimaru's bed, dressed in casual clothes. You're going off on your own, leaving me behind? She had always believed herself to be close to Orochimaru, but now he was leaving without her? Orochimaru gave a light shrug. Jiraiya hasn't returned yet. If you come with me, there won't be anyone left to assist the Hokage. Tsunade sighed, waving her hand dismissively. Fine, fine, you're right. But still, if both of you are gone, what am I supposed to do? I'll be bored out of my mind here. Well, you've got Nawaki, Orochimaru replied, glancing at the boy. Yeah, sis, I'll be here. Nawaki added, trying to cheer her up. Ha! Tsunade ruffled Nawaki's hair affectionately. You're cute. An hour later, at the village gates, Orochimaru stood ready to leave for the land of rice fields. The only people there to see him off were Tsunade and Nawaki. It was a quiet, almost lonely farewell, but Orochimaru had grown used to it. Danzo had no reason to come, and Hiruzen was too busy to see him off. Orochimaru never expected much in the way of goodbyes. Orochimaru, take care of yourself, Tsunade said softly, stepping forward to wrap her arms around him in an uncharacteristically emotional hug. She didn't want to let him go. Today, Tsunade was wearing casual clothes, and Orochimaru couldn't help but notice how close she pressed against him. I will, Orochimaru replied, though his tone was slightly teasing. But Tsunade, you've been growing a bit too fast. Tsunade didn't even blush. Instead, she leaned closer to whisper in his ear with a smirk. Oh? Do you like it? Why don't you try and see? Humph, reluctant as always, Tsunade pouted, but there was a mischievous gleam in her eyes. Orochimaru chuckled and gently pushed her away. All right, enough of that. I'm leaving. As he turned and walked away, he could still feel Tsunade's gaze on his back, but he didn't look back. He knew better. Tsunade's teasing was just that, teasing. If he ever took her seriously, she'd be the first to punch him. Chapter 112. Orochimaru was headed toward the land of rice fields, and there was little need to explain why. At the same time, as Orochimaru made his way toward the land of rice fields, a couple also crossed the border into the same territory. Both husband and wife were cloaked in black, stumbling along, looking thoroughly exhausted. Husband, can we rest for a moment? My stomach, it hurts. The woman was panting heavily, her face pale with exhaustion. If one looked closely, they'd notice she was heavily pregnant under that cloak, her belly round and ready for delivery. Hold on just a bit longer, the man replied, teeth gritted. We're at the edge of the land of grass, it's not safe here. Let's get over this mountain first, then we can rest. But, it hurts so much, the woman pleaded, struggling to keep moving. A heavily pregnant woman, running for her life for so long, it was a miracle she hadn't collapsed already. Seeing her in such pain, the man hesitated, then cursed under his breath. All right, wait here for a second. I'll find us a safe spot. The woman nodded weakly, resting against a large boulder. The man quickly ran ahead, searching for shelter, and soon came back to help her sit down under the cover of the trees, hidden by a large rock. This spot should be safe enough for now. At least we won't be easily spotted by any passing ninjas, he said, guiding her down gently. The woman, still in obvious discomfort, finally asked, Husband, why didn't we just go to the land of fire? It's a lot closer than all this running. There was confusion and frustration in her voice. After all, the land of fire was the most powerful nation in the ninja world. They had already crossed its border, why hadn't they sought refuge there? Hearing this, the man's face twisted with anger. The land of fire? Ha! If they weren't so incompetent, we wouldn't be in this mess to begin with. Our village was destroyed, it's not entirely their fault, the woman argued weakly. Maybe not completely their fault, the man replied, still bitter, but look at the world now. The whole ninja world's on edge, and the land of fire can't even save itself. If we head there, we'll be dead before we know it. So if not the land of fire, where are we going? She asked, still not fully understanding. We're heading to Amigakure, the man said with determination. The village hidden in the rain? Yes. Hanzo, the leader of Amigakure, is a legendary figure, a demigod in the ninja world. He's powerful enough to protect us. All right, if you say so, the woman agreed, too tired to argue any further. After resting briefly, the two set off again, unaware that a strange figure had been watching them from the shadows. A small, white head popped up from the ground where they had just rested. Fleeing from another country? That's strange enough, but the woman has an enormous amount of chakra, yet she's not a ninja? With a growing curiosity, the white figure slowly sank back into the ground, silently following the couple. Half a day later, deep underground in a dark, cavernous space, there was almost no sign of life. The environment was bleak, and even underground creatures avoided this place. Yet, amidst the emptiness, there was a massive hollow chamber. The chamber was vast, with a few flickering lights swaying in the gloom, indicating some kind of air circulation. Without airflow, the candles wouldn't be able to flicker. Through the dim light, one could barely make out the form of a terrifying, colossal figure, its presence like that of an ancient giant from legend. But this wasn't some benevolent figure of myth, this giant radiated a menacing, almost demonic aura. At the foot of this enormous figure sat an old man, his body frail and worn, connected to the giant by what looked like roots that fed into his back, sustaining his life. Slowly, the old man lifted his head, revealing eyes filled with lavender ripples, the distinctive Rinnegan. His voice, weak and raspy, echoed in the chamber like the creak of old, wind-blown bellows. Zetsu. What is it? Uchiha Madara asked. From the ground, a white figure emerged, grinning as he spoke. Ha, Madara. Guess what one of my clones just saw on the surface? Madara didn't bother to look up. Stop playing games. What did you see? There's a pregnant woman from the Uzumaki clan, and she looks ready to give birth. Madara's eyes gleamed with interest at the mention of the Uzumaki clan. A pregnant Uzumaki woman? I hadn't expected them to come to me, but it seems fate has a way of working things out. Follow her. Don't worry, I've already got them in my sights, Zetsu said, his voice amused. But wait, it seems they're in trouble. What kind of trouble? The woman looks like she's about to give birth, and they've just run into some ninjas from the land of grass. Madara chuckled softly. Maybe my luck isn't so bad after all. Sometimes, fate truly does work in strange ways. As a former friend of the first Hokage, Madara knew the power of the Uzumaki clan well. But with age weighing on him and time running out, he couldn't afford to take risks by openly seeking out the remaining members of their clan. That would risk drawing Konoha's attention. He had to bide his time and wait for the right opportunity. And now, it seemed, the opportunity had come to him. The Uzumaki clan had been annihilated, but a couple had survived, crossing the land of grass in hopes of finding refuge. And the woman was pregnant, a perfect vessel for his plans. It was as if destiny had delivered them to his doorstep. Meanwhile, Orochimaru had already anticipated that things like this might happen, but he didn't concern himself with it too much. The world was vast, and finding Nagato's parents on his own would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. He simply didn't have the time or resources for that kind of pursuit. For now, he had other matters to attend to, and so he found himself in the war-torn land of rice fields once again. Despite the tense relationships between the major nations, Konoha still hadn't declared war on the Land of Lightning. According to intelligence, the Land of Lightning had provided extensive evidence that they weren't involved in the destruction of Uzushio. Additionally, the peace treaty they had signed after their previous conflict seemed to be holding for now. Orochimaru scoffed at the idea. He knew that Kumogakur had a habit of studying the secret techniques of other villages. If they weren't involved in the downfall of the Uzumaki clan, then no one was. Orochimaru could barely suppress his laughter at the thought. Still, the fact that Konoha hadn't engaged in open conflict with Kumogakur meant that the land of rice fields would remain relatively safe for now. That was good news for him. Reaching a mountainous area, Orochimaru surveyed the terrain. The place was surrounded by rivers and peaks, a scenic location that would make a fine vacation spot under different circumstances. But leisure was far from Orochimaru's mind. Suddenly, a figure dressed in black appeared out of nowhere, kneeling before him. Lord Orochimaru, the figure said, head bowed. Yoru, how's the lab? Orochimaru asked. Everything is ready. Good. Take me inside, Orochimaru commanded. Chapter 113, Orochimaru nodded and dismissed the kneeling figure without a word, walking directly into the lab. Nestled at the foot of a remote mountain, this place was secluded and difficult to access, but the surroundings were surprisingly scenic. Orochimaru had chosen this location in the land of rice fields during a previous mission. He had stored all relevant details about this place in his memory, and later implanted them into the mind of his clone, Yoru, to set up an experimental base here. The land of rice fields had no ninja village of its own, and with Yoru's strength, no one could oppose him. So, the lab was built without any issues. As Orochimaru stepped inside, he found it largely empty. Only a few basic pieces of scientific equipment were present, items Yoru had managed to gather himself. How many experimental pods do we have? Orochimaru asked, his tone calm but expectant. 18 in total, Yoru replied. 18? Orochimaru frowned. That's far too few, but it'll have to do for now. With that, Orochimaru waved his hand, and suddenly, clang, 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 a host of scientific research equipment appeared out of thin air. There were DNA scanners, computers, generators, experimental benches, everything one would expect from a cutting-edge lab. These were items he had either stored in his personal system or smuggled from a hidden chamber near Konoha. Here, far from prying eyes, he could use them freely without concern. The only issue was that, aside from Yoru, there was no one to assist him. When it came to clones, one had to consider their thinking capabilities. Most mass-produced clones were little more than automatons, barely able to think beyond the most basic of tasks. They could fight, but their slow mental processing and lack of independent thought made them unsuitable for more complex work. However, Yoru was different. Orochimaru had crafted him with a greater degree of independent thought, making him capable of tasks like building the lab on his own. Some might say that giving clones independent thinking was a flaw, as they could develop their own emotions and potentially rebel against their master, much like how even the most brainwashed subordinates en route could still turn against Danzo. But Orochimaru wasn't worried. His method of brainwashing was far more advanced. He didn't just alter the clones' thoughts, he erased entire memories and implanted new ones. The clones he created believed that Orochimaru was everything, their provider, their creator, and their reason for existence. For him, they would gladly sacrifice their lives. Just like Kimimaro, Girin, and Kabuto had in the original timeline, Orochimaru's followers were fiercely loyal, even competing for the privilege of serving him. Rebellion wasn't a concern. Still, clones were clones. If they were too independent, they might develop unwanted emotions when they saw others like them, leading to complications. For now, Orochimaru had two options: either erase Yoru's ability to think independently or clone someone new. Since he didn't have the time to capture new subjects, he decided to temporarily suppress Yoru's independent thought. He had backups of all his techniques, and restoring Yoru's mind would only cost him a few days at most. 18 experimental pods weren't enough, but Yoru had limited funds, and much of it had gone toward acquiring other necessary equipment. Orochimaru couldn't worry about that now. First, he'd cultivate clones from the available pods, and then he'd expand the base. Once he had more personnel, things would move more quickly. With that in mind, Orochimaru set to work. 6 months later, Orochimaru's first batch of clones was complete. Thanks to the meticulous technical data he had on hand, failure was practically impossible. After all, everything was controlled by high-tech computers. 19 clones in total, including Yoru. All of them had the same features: black hair, black eyes, dressed in dark uniforms. In the meantime, the number of experimental pods had been increased to 100, the maximum capacity this base could handle. From this point forward, the lab could produce 100 clones every 6 months. It wasn't the fastest rate, but it was more than sufficient for Orochimaru's purposes. Now that the first batch of clones had been created, they began helping Orochimaru with routine tasks: observing, recording, cleaning, standing guard. 9 of you will stay here and manage the lab, Orochimaru said, surveying the black-haired clones standing before him. The rest of you, take this. He handed the remaining 10 clones strange-looking devices, mineral detectors. In addition to his genetic experiments, Orochimaru had a new focus: mining. His research into human cloning was progressing well, but he was already looking ahead to the next stage: artificial humans and cell regeneration. Artificial humans were a step beyond clones, capable of true independent thought, making them fully autonomous beings. Cell regeneration, meanwhile, would allow for advanced healing and biological repair, similar to techniques like Tsunade's creation rebirth. Both of these techniques were incredibly complex and would take a long time to develop. So for now, Orochimaru decided to pause his genetic research and shift his attention toward weapons technology. Most of the system's weapons tech revolved around firearms and explosives. Orochimaru knew that standard guns were little more than faster shuriken, useless against most trained ninjas. However, the more advanced weapons might prove valuable. But to build them, he needed metals, smelting facilities, and factories. Before any of that could happen, though, he needed the approval of the daimyo. Even in a relatively weak country like the land of rice fields, creating weapons without official approval would raise too many red flags. If the authorities decided to investigate, it could lead to unnecessary complications. What? You want to build a village? The daimyo of the land of rice fields was completely stunned when Orochimaru appeared before him with this proposal. In an era as chaotic as this, the idea of founding a new village was absurd. Wouldn't such a village be destroyed by one of the major powers as soon as it was established? Orochimaru, ever the calm and persuasive figure, placed 2 large boxes in front of the daimyo. "Yes," he said with a smile. "As long as you agree, this 20 million ryo will be yours. And I can personally guarantee that your country will no longer suffer from rogue ninjas or bandits. Please, take your time and consider my offer carefully." The daimyo stared at the boxes in front of him, eyes wide. 20 million ryo and a promise of peace. How could he refuse? Chapter 114, Orochimaru's proposal left the daimyo of the land of rice fields both excited and cautious. Without a proper ninja village, the country had been constantly invaded and exploited, often left defenseless against even wandering rogue ninjas. It was one thing to be bullied by the great nations, whose strength was undeniable, but to be terrorized by random mercenaries and rogue shinobi was a humiliation the daimyo could hardly endure. So, when Orochimaru suggested building a ninja village in his country, the daimyo weighed the pros and cons carefully. The benefits were obvious. Even though Orochimaru mentioned that his village wouldn't be taking typical commissions, he promised a steady stream of funds to the country and, more importantly, stability, something the daimyo desperately craved. But there was a risk too. Establishing a new ninja village would undoubtedly attract attention from the larger nations. Even if they weren't outright hostile, they would definitely keep a close eye on any new military power that emerged, especially in such a strategically weak country. Then again, the daimyo thought, if the location of this new village remained secret enough, it could be hidden from the prying eyes of other nations. With this in mind, the daimyo nodded slightly, deep in thought. "It's not a bad plan, but if you're going to build a village, won't you be on your own? Without other ninjas to support you, it could be challenging." "Who said I'd be alone?" Orochimaru smiled faintly. As if on cue, 3 figures materialized seemingly out of nowhere. They were identical black clothes, black hair, identical height, and identical faces. What is this?" the daimyo asked, completely bewildered. At first, he thought they were triplets, but when Orochimaru briefly explained his cloning technology, the daimyo was left even more confused and intrigued. Clones? Was such a thing really possible? When Orochimaru demonstrated their combat abilities, the daimyo's astonishment deepened. The clones exhibited strength and skill at a level that rivaled high-ranking jounin. The daimyo was no fool. He understood the implications of this technology. With the power Orochimaru had at his disposal, and the potential to create even more clones, he could very well raise an army capable of reshaping the ninja world right here in the land of rice fields. "Is there anything I can do to help?" the daimyo finally asked, unable to contain his newfound ambition. Orochimaru smiled calmly. "No need for help. Just stay out of my way, and we won't have any problems." The daimyo swallowed hard and nodded. "Very well. As long as there's no major issue, I won't interfere." It was a small price to pay for the potential strength Orochimaru could bring to his country. The daimyo was convinced that keeping Orochimaru's activities secret would be key to the rise of the land of rice fields. As for the fear of Orochimaru seizing power, the daimyo wasn't too concerned. He had seen enough to know that if Orochimaru wanted to, he could easily kill him and replace him with a clone. There was no need for Orochimaru to seek his approval or play political games. The daimyo understood this very clearly. As long as he didn't provoke Orochimaru, his position would remain safe. In this regard, the daimyo's thinking was spot on. Orochimaru had no interest in political power or ruling over the country. He was far too focused on his experiments and goals to care about something as trivial as governing. Thus, the conversation between them ended successfully, and Orochimaru gained the daimyo's approval to begin building his village. Would release, 4-pillar house technique. With a loud boom, houses rose from the ground in a remote forest deep in the land of rice fields. Orochimaru used the abundant chakra in his body with ease, showing no signs of fatigue. While the technique was originally developed by Yamato, Orochimaru found it incredibly useful for quickly constructing buildings. It might be a jutsu designed for something as simple as house building, but Orochimaru had no shame in using it. In fact, he rather enjoyed its convenience. Earth release, earth-style wall. The clones Orochimaru had created pressed their hands to the ground, summoning sturdy earthen walls that surrounded the newly built houses. These clones, all possessing the Sharingan, were skilled in the 5 elemental releases, so using earth release techniques was nothing out of the ordinary. With the combined efforts of Orochimaru and his 19 clones, a small but functional ninja village was constructed in less than 3 days. The houses were not for the clones, of course they would simply use the sleeping pods when not working. These houses were for the future recruits and subordinates Orochimaru planned to bring in. Next on his agenda was mining for minerals. Once the second batch of clones was ready, Orochimaru would begin the process of refining metals and crafting weapons. But then, an idea struck him. Maybe I don't need to wait for the second batch of clones, Orochimaru mused to himself. A few days later, word began spreading through the towns and villages of the land of rice fields. Looking for miners. 1,000 ryo per day. What? 1,000 ryo a day? Is this for real? It can't be, right? Who pays that much? Ordinary citizens couldn't believe what they were hearing. To put things in perspective, a typical Genin-level mission might only pay 5,000 ryo, split between 3 people. The daily wage for a regular laborer rarely exceeded 600 ryo, which was usually just enough to sustain a family of 3. And now, in the middle of a time of war, someone was offering 1,000 ryo a day, plus food and lodging? It sounded too good to be true. Still, curiosity got the better of them, and many men traveled to the location mentioned in the notice. They were mostly middle-aged men, hoping to provide for their families. When they arrived, they found a makeshift office, where Orochimaru sat reviewing documents. One particularly bold man strode up to Orochimaru's desk and slapped the job notice down with a smirk. "Hey, are you really paying 1,000 ryo a day?" he asked, his tone arrogant, as if daring Orochimaru to prove him wrong. But before he could say another word, a kunai appeared at his throat. He hadn't even seen who drew the blade, but there was cold steel pressing against his skin. "Show some respect to Lord Orochimaru, or I'll end you right here," a cold voice warned. The man turned slowly, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Standing behind him was one of Orochimaru's clones, his black eyes filled with deadly intent. Lord Orochimaru," the man stammered, his arrogance evaporating in an instant. Under the chilling gaze of the clones, the man's attitude changed completely. He wasn't the only one. Many of the other workers had come expecting a trap and were ready to flee at the first sign of danger. But then, Orochimaru's calm smile and his offer of paying a full day's wages in advance changed everything. Slowly, the crowd began to relax. The money was real, and they hadn't been harmed. By the end of the day, most of the men had decided to stay. Their task was simple: transport the minerals that Orochimaru's mining machines extracted and deliver them to a designated location. Of course, this location was temporary. Orochimaru's true base of operations remained hidden from them. 1 day passed. 2 days. By the 3rd day, the workers realized that not only were they being paid as promised, but they were also being treated well. Orochimaru provided ample food and shelter, and no one had been harmed. By the end of the week, more and more people arrived, eager to join. Half a month passed, and Orochimaru's name had spread like wildfire throughout the land of rice fields. Long live Lord Orochimaru. I'll work for him for the rest of my life. Orochimaru-sama is the savior of our family. The savior? Really? You don't understand. Before I came here, we hadn't eaten for 2 days. Is that true? Orochimaru-sama is truly generous. Before long, Orochimaru was regarded as a hero, a savior to the common people of the land of rice fields. And with this, Orochimaru had easily, and quietly, built a loyal following without shedding a drop of blood. Chapter 115, the house the workers lived in had been quickly built by Orochimaru using his wood release. Since there was no cost for the land, and with his nearly unlimited chakra, conjuring homes was as simple as casting a couple of jutsu. As for the food, it was prepared by the wives and daughters of the locals hired for the task. Orochimaru had two of his clones don cloaks and masks, tasked with protecting the women and assisting in transporting the meals. Money, however, was never a concern for Orochimaru. In this remote area, there were only about 100 or 200 able-bodied men, aside from the elderly, sick, or disabled. Paying 1,000 ryo per person per day meant he was spending about 100,000 to 200,000 ryo daily. But for Orochimaru, who could make deals with neighboring small countries for 50 to 60 million ryo at a time, this was an insignificant expense, even if it lasted for years. After all, Orochimaru had the ability to implant research data into his clones, allowing them to mass-produce genetic repair solutions and other lucrative items. When it came to money, he could practically print it. Of course, being a man with foresight, Orochimaru understood the principles of scarcity. By limiting the availability of his potions, he made them more desirable. Rare things, after all, commanded higher prices. So, he controlled the supply. Each small country could only purchase once a year, receiving around 120 repair solutions and 20 enhancement serum. Each transaction brought in roughly 90 million ryo. Over the past 3 to 4 years, with deals from 3 small countries annually, Orochimaru had accumulated close to 1 billion ryo. A billion ryo that was the kind of wealth that rivaled transactions between great nations. For Orochimaru, money was never a problem. While Orochimaru quietly built his clone army and industrial base, the tension between the major nations was rapidly escalating. At the end of Konoha Year 29, the death of Uzumaki Mito marked the end of an era, and Uzumaki Kushina officially became the second Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. The transition was kept a closely guarded secret, so Kushina didn't experience the kind of public scrutiny Naruto would later face. However, Uzumaki Mito's death signaled the beginning of open conflict between nations. The Land of Wind, the Land of Earth, and the Land of Fire were already engaged in skirmishes, testing each other's strength. By Konoha Year 30, the tension was palpable. At Root headquarters, hidden deep within the village, Yakushi Nono, now a fully trained operative, knelt before Danzo. Dressed in full Root ninja gear, her appearance was that of a seasoned warrior despite her young age. Danzo's voice was low, yet commanding. "Nono, I've trained you for long enough. Now, it's time to serve the village." "Please give me your orders, Danzo-sama," Nono replied, her tone full of respect. Though she had attended the ninja academy like any other child, her real training had always been with Root. After graduation, she went straight into full-time service for the organization. Now, at only 11 years old, she was already more skilled than many adults. "We've received intelligence that the Land of Wind is planning a large-scale attack. Your mission is to infiltrate Sunagakure and confirm whether this information is accurate. If it is, gather the details of their strategy, the time, location, and specifics of the operation and report back to Konoha. This will be a long-term mission." "Understood," Nono responded without hesitation. With her orders in hand, Nono left for the Land of Wind. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, who had been away on a reconnaissance mission, was recalled to Konoha by Hiruzen. Upon his return, the village's atmosphere felt heavy. Everyone could sense the looming threat of war. Fear gripped the hearts of many, worried about what would happen if they or their loved ones were called to the front lines. But not everyone shared that anxiety. There was one person in the village who remained as carefree as ever, Jiraiya. Having just returned, Jiraiya's thoughts were far from the battlefield. Instead, his attention was drawn to Tsunade, who stood in front of him in casual attire, and his jaw nearly hit the floor. "Tsunade? What happened? You've grown even more impressive," Jiraiya blurted out, staring at her in disbelief. At the time, Jiraiya was heading back to the Hokage's office with the third Hokage when Tsunade, dressed in a ponytail and a white mesh top, walked through the door. Seeing her like this, Jiraiya was overcome with jealousy, though not of Tsunade herself, but of Orochimaru. How could Orochimaru not be utterly addicted to being around someone like her? Tsunade, who had been excited to see Jiraiya return safely, immediately scowled at his comment. "Really, Jiraiya? After all these years, you haven't changed at all." Can't you be more mature? What do you mean? I'm mature, Jiraiya protested. By the way, where's Orochimaru? Shouldn't he be with you? Since his return, Jiraiya hadn't seen a trace of Orochimaru. Tsunade sighed, throwing up her hands. I have no idea. He left me a message, but he didn't tell me where he was going. Over the past year, Orochimaru had only contacted Tsunade twice, and both times, his messages were brief and cryptic. Orochimaru's been gone too? Jiraiya asked, surprised. He had been away on a prophecy-related mission, but now it seemed Orochimaru had left as well. Before Jiraiya could dwell on it further, the third Hokage interrupted their conversation. We can catch up later, Hiruzen said, his tone serious. Jiraiya and Tsunade both turned their attention to him, realizing the gravity of the situation. Tensions between the nations had reached a boiling point, and war was on the horizon. Konoha had already entered a state of high alert. Is it really that bad? Jiraiya asked, his expression growing more serious. When you left, things were still calm. Now the entire ninja world is on the brink of war, Hiruzen explained, taking a deep puff from his pipe. The smoke curled lazily into the air as he exhaled. I wouldn't have called you back otherwise. Wait, since when do you smoke, sensei? Jiraiya asked, raising an eyebrow. Hiruzen gave an awkward smile. It's just been the stress lately. Can't help it. It seems like a lot has happened while I've been gone, Jiraiya muttered. Tsunade, however, was less concerned with the political tensions and more with her missing boyfriend. How long has Orochimaru been gone? More than a year, almost 2, Hiruzen replied. Jiraiya's eyes lit up mischievously. Tsunade, that means you've been without him for over a year, right? Doesn't that get lonely? Maybe you should consider me instead. Tsunade shot him a withering glare. What are you talking about? Obviously, you should make me your boyfriend. Jiraiya said with a grin. He's been gone for so long, ignoring you. You've got to be feeling lonely, right? And here I am, Jiraiya the Great, wise, strong, and single. If you choose me, I promise you'll never be bored. Don't waste your time, Jiraiya, Tsunade cut him off, her tone flat. With how perverted you are, I'll never be interested in you, not in this life. Most people would have been disheartened by such a blunt rejection, but Jiraiya was not most people. Instead of backing off, he leaned in and whispered something into Tsunade's ear, his voice low and suggestive. Bam! A loud crash echoed under the Hokage's office as Tsunade's fist slammed into Jiraiya, sending him flying into the wall. You idiot! Don't say such disgusting things. Tsunade yelled, her face red with both anger and embarrassment. One more word out of you, and I'll tear your mouth off, you pervert. Jiraiya, now slumped against the wall, grinned sheepishly despite the throbbing pain in his face. Totally worth it, he muttered under his breath. Chapter 116, Tsunade's roar reverberated through the streets, immediately drawing the attention of passers-by. Unbothered by the stares, she stormed out of the Hokage building, muttering angrily to herself, that idiot. After nearly 4 years, and he still has the same perverted tendencies, no sign of changing at all. Compared to Jiraiya, Orochimaru was the picture of perfection in her mind. At the thought of Orochimaru, Tsunade's expression softened, shifting into a warm smile, as if Jiraiya's nonsense had already faded from memory. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, now crumpled in a heap on the floor, was barely hanging onto consciousness. The occasional twitch of his sandals was the only indication that he was still alive after taking Tsunade's infamous punch. Whoosh! A Chunin suddenly appeared in front of Tsunade, his expression slightly awkward. Tsunade-sama. HM? What is it? She asked, pausing mid-stride. The Chunin hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. Well, you might need to head over to the Ninja Academy. Ninja Academy? Tsunade's eyes narrowed in understanding. Ah. I see what's going on. Half an hour earlier, at the Konoha Ninja Academy. Tomato! Hey, from now on, your name is Tomato. Ha ha ha. Look at that round, chubby face and that bright red hair. Doesn't she look just like a tomato? How could a tomato ever become Hokage? I hate tomatoes more than anything. Same here. I leave them in my salad every time. An unpopular tomato like you will never be recognized by the village. Ha 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 ha. A group of boys stood around a little girl with striking red hair, laughing loudly. The girl's face was flushed, but she remained silent, glaring at them. One boy, emboldened by the group's cheers, reached out to grab the girl's hair. Tomato Day is here. Let's harvest some fruit. What they didn't realize was that the girl was teetering on the edge of exploding. Bang! Before the boy could react, his wrist was tightly gripped by the girl's small but powerful hand. Who do you think you're calling a tomato? She growled. For the record, I hate tomatoes too. With a yell, the girl used her surprising strength to lift the boy off the ground and throw him to the side like he was weightless. Before the other boys could react, she lunged forward, fists flying, slamming into the boy's head repeatedly. Asterisk bang. Bang! Bang, asterisk. Punch after punch landed with brutal force. If you keep calling me a tomato, I'll make sure you won't be able to eat or even walk straight. The other boys screamed and scrambled to get away, helpless against her strength. As they fled, the girl heard another burst of laughter nearby. She whipped her head around and spotted a blond boy in the same class, giggling at the scene. And what are you laughing at? She snapped. You laugh one more time, and I'll beat you up too, you sissy. The blond boy froze, eyes wide with terror, and quickly turned his back on her to avoid her wrath. Really, Kushina, why are you always fighting? Tsunade sighed as she ruffled the red-haired girl's hair in the academy office. Uzumaki Kushina, despite her fierce temper, had a special place in Tsunade's heart. After all, Uzumaki Mito, Kushina's predecessor as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, was Tsunade's grandmother. There was a family bond between them, and after Mito passed, Tsunade had taken it upon herself to keep an eye on the surviving members of the Uzumaki clan. Today, however, Tsunade had been summoned to the academy because Kushina had beaten up a group of boys. Kushina, feeling guilty, kept her head down, waiting for the scolding she assumed was coming. The teacher nervously began explaining the situation. Tsunade-sama, it's like this. But after hearing the story, Tsunade's reaction wasn't what Kushina expected. So that's what happened, huh? Tsunade said with a casual shrug. Alright, let's go, Kushina. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the office. Both the teacher and Kushina were left dumbfounded by Tsunade's nonchalant response, but Kushina quickly followed her out. Wait, aren't you going to scold me? Kushina asked, confused. Tsunade didn't even look back. Why would I scold you? Kushina frowned. Because I beat them up? Isn't fighting in school supposed to be wrong? Tsunade waved her hand dismissively. So what? You beat them up. Big deal. If it were me, I probably would have hit them even harder. Kushina's eyes widened in surprise, but Tsunade wasn't finished. Kushina, listen. If you go around picking fights with people for no reason, then yeah, I'd scold you. But if someone messes with you first, don't be afraid to give them what they deserve. If it gets out of hand, don't worry, I'll back you up. Tsunade's tone was so confident, so resolute, that it left no room for doubt. They walked down the street, Tsunade's words hanging in the air. For someone like Tsunade, who had always been quick-tempered and fierce, her attitude was clearly rubbing off on Kushina. In fact, Kushina admired her for it. Tsunade's boldness and strength made her an ideal role model in Kushina's eyes. But then Kushina's expression shifted to one of worry. Tsunade-sama, can I ask you something? Tsunade glanced down at her. Sure, what's on your mind? Kushina's voice dropped. If I keep acting like this, will anyone ever like me? Tsunade paused, a little taken aback by the question. Kushina's red hair had always made her stand out, and being different often meant being isolated. If she was also known for being violent, it was easy to understand why Kushina might worry that no one would want to be around her. Tsunade thought for a moment, then smiled. Kushina, what do you think of me? You? Kushina blinked. I don't really know much, but I've heard people say you like gambling and drinking, and that you have a pretty bad temper. Tsunade's eyebrow twitched. Before Kushina could finish, she realized her mistake. No, wait! That's not what I meant. Seeing Tsunade's narrowing eyes, she quickly waved her hands defensively. I mean, I really like you, Tsunade-sama. You're strong, and I want to be just like you. Tsunade's face darkened, but she forced a smile, trying to keep her temper in check. Good to know, she muttered, though her patience was wearing thin. She took a deep breath and added, Don't let appearances fool you, kid. Believe it or not, I have a boyfriend. What? Kushina's jaw dropped in disbelief. You have a boyfriend? The look on her face was as if she'd just heard the most impossible thing in the world. Tsunade's patience was officially shot. That look felt like a knife in her heart. Could she really be that unbelievable? But before she could lash out, Kushina's next words brought her back to her senses. Tsunade-sama's boyfriend must be an incredible ninja, right? Tsunade's mood instantly improved. She couldn't help but smile with pride. Of course! I can say with confidence that among all the ninjas our age, there's no one better than him. Really? Kushina's eyes sparkled with amazement. He must be so strong. Definitely. Tsunade beamed, her chest swelling with pride as she thought of Orochimaru. For her, being with Orochimaru felt like the best decision she'd ever made. The more she talked about him, the more animated she became, recounting Orochimaru's many accomplishments. At one point, she nearly let some classified information slip, but caught herself just in time. Still, even without the sensitive details, her stories were enough to spark a deep curiosity in Kushina. Tsunade, who was usually fiery and temperamental, was now openly showing a softer, more feminine side, something Kushina found fascinating. For the young Uzumaki, Orochimaru had now become a figure of great intrigue. And seeing Tsunade act like this? Well, it wasn't something most people got to witness. It was clear that whoever this man was, he was someone special. Chapter 117, On the other side, in the land of rice fields, Orochimaru had been in this country for nearly 2 years. At this moment, in an open field near the border, a massive, khaki-colored python was coiled up, flicking its red tongue as it watched the scene ahead. Its golden snake eyes gleamed with an unsettling chill. Around it, several ninjas lay scattered on the ground, defeated. Orochimaru stood nearby, observing the short-haired girl in front of him. He couldn't help but marvel at how fate had brought them together. The girl wasn't particularly attractive, dressed in simple civilian clothes. But her striking short red hair made her stand out. What's your name? Orochimaru asked, his tone calm but probing. My name is... The girl hesitated before replying, my name is Chana. Chana, huh? Orochimaru smiled faintly. It's a nice name. So, would you like to come with me? Follow you? The girl, Chana, was visibly confused, staring at the pale-skinned, long-haired man before her. Orochimaru's expression remained indifferent. Yes. If you come with me, no one will be able to harm you. Really? She asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. It's up to you, Orochimaru replied, spreading his hands casually. He didn't feel the need to explain further. In this war-torn era, those who had lost their homes would hardly refuse such an offer. And this girl, in particular, was from the Uzumaki clan, he could sense it. As if confirming Orochimaru's expectations, Chana quickly nodded. She had no other choice. She had fled her village and reached the land of rice fields in a desperate attempt to escape the chaos. But even here, she was found by a group of wandering ninjas. If it weren't for Orochimaru's timely intervention, she would have been sold, or worse. After all, Uzumaki clan members fetched a high price on the black market. Orochimaru turned and began walking, with Chana following close behind. Before long, they arrived at the base of a beautiful mountain. Orochimaru gestured toward the landscape. "I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Orochimaru. From now on, this is your workplace. I'll help you get familiar with everything here." "Yes, Lord Orochimaru," Chana replied respectfully. She was still confused and unsure about her future, but for now, she could only follow Orochimaru's lead. Satisfied with her response, Orochimaru nodded slightly and led her toward his experimental base. Chana's eyes widened as they approached the base. This is amazing." Orochimaru gestured toward the base. "From now on, these people will follow your orders. As long as they are here, no one will hurt you unless a great nation decides to invade, that is." Chana, a member of the Uzumaki clan, was only 15 years old. Orochimaru's promise of protection sounded almost arrogant, but she sensed that this man had the power to back up his words. After all, she had seen him take down 7 or 8 rogue ninjas in mere moments, without breaking a sweat. Despite her initial shock, Chana grew more curious about Orochimaru. Anyone who could make such bold claims in these dangerous times had to be incredibly strong. But when she entered Orochimaru's secret experimental base, her understanding of his power deepened even further. The base was filled with people who looked eerily similar to each other, working tirelessly on various tasks. In one section, rows of experimental pods and sleeping chambers stood side by side, with new clones being grown inside. Chana didn't know what to make of it. She had never seen anything like this before. Orochimaru noticed her astonishment and smiled. "Come. I'll get you familiar with your duties." He began showing her around, introducing her to the different areas of the lab and explaining her responsibilities. First, he had her acclimate to the work environment, then he implanted her data into the clones' minds and assigned her some authority over them. With this setup, the clones would recognize her as a supervisor, preventing any chance of rebellion. Not that Orochimaru expected any, but it was always wise to be cautious. In truth, Orochimaru had been contemplating whether to restore Yoru's independent thinking so that he could manage the base in Orochimaru's absence. The clones, after all, lacked independent thought and wouldn't function properly if left alone for too long. But before he could make a decision, fate had brought Chana to him. And surprisingly, this girl wasn't just anyone, she was the mother of Karen. Yes, the very same Karen who would later become a key figure in Orochimaru's research. Although the name Chana might have been a fake alias, Orochimaru was certain of her identity. Her hair color and healing ability were unmistakable traits of the Uzumaki bloodline. Orochimaru remembered how, during the brief skirmish with the rogue ninjas, he overheard one of them demand that the girl heal him by biting, a signature ability of the Uzumaki clan. Between her distinctive hair and her unusual healing powers, it wasn't difficult to piece together the truth. A smile crept across Orochimaru's lips. Before Yakushi Kabuto was even born, he had crossed paths with Nono and Root. And now, before Karen was born, he had encountered her mother. Sometimes, fate had a peculiar way of working. Meanwhile, in the land of rain, the sound of battle echoed through the dense forests. Shouts of desperation and explosions filled the air as ninjas clashed in a fierce fight. "Retreat! Quick, fall back!" Figures moved through the trees in a blur, carrying their wounded comrades as they fled toward their base. Blood soaked their clothes, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. But as they raced through the forest, a strange noise reached their ears. Ta 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 ta. What is that sound? The noise grew louder, coming from all directions. Suddenly, a squad of puppets appeared in the sky, their wooden joints clicking and clattering with every movement. "Damn it! It's the puppet troops from the Sand Ninja. We've been ambushed." Konoha shinobi, form a defensive line, now, a commanding voice shouted. The Konoha ninjas quickly moved into position. Mid and long-range fighters, prepare for attack. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. Wind style, Gale Palm. Lightning style, Lightning Serpent. Wind, fire, and lightning clashed in the skies, creating a chaotic battlefield. But the constant rain and Amagakure made their jutsu less effective. The moisture dampened their flames and scattered their winds. We can't keep this up. We need to concentrate our forces and break through. Yes. Someone needs to get past them and request backup from the Hokage. Flank them. Move, quickly. Chapter 118, What? Ambushed by the Sand Ninja Puppet Army? In the Hokage's office, Hiruzen's eyes narrowed upon hearing the news. Although tensions had been growing between the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind, up until now neither side had launched a serious attack. But the deployment of the Sand Ninja's puppet army signaled something far more decisive. The Land of Wind was fully committing to war. Gather the troops and prepare to counterattack. Hiruzen commanded without hesitation. In response, the ninja forces of Konoha were mobilized, fully armed and ready to move out. After confirming the marching routes and supply lines, the shinobi began to assemble. Meanwhile, Danzo entered the Hokage's office, throwing a stack of reports onto Hiruzen's desk. Based on the intelligence gathered by my subordinates, we've confirmed the 3 main routes of the enemy's attack. Hiruzen glanced up, slightly surprised by the detailed information. Are you sure this is accurate? Danzo's eyes were cold, confident. It's accurate. You can count on it. Hiruzen nodded. Good. We'll act on this immediately. Konoha's vanguard troops began their march toward the border of the Land of Fire, a powerful force moving in unison. Upon arriving at the border, they didn't immediately engage the enemy but instead focused on establishing a temporary base camp. After all, wars weren't won in a single day. Ninja battles were different from all-out brawls. It was a game of strategy, scouting, sensing, attacking from a distance. Skirmishes might leave people wounded, but full-scale killings were rare unless the situation called for it or a mission required it. Setting up a solid base camp was essential. If the Konoha ninjas were going to fight with full force, they needed secure backing to maintain their strength and stamina. As the troops left Konoha one by one, Jiraiya could be found squatting at the village gates, adjusting his arm guards. His expression was one of mild frustration. Seriously, where the hell is Orochimaru? He's not back yet, he grumbled, clearly irritated. As a man burdened with the prophecy of saving the ninja world, Jiraiya had returned to the village in a hurry, expecting his fellow Sannin to be around. But Orochimaru was still nowhere to be seen. Who knows? Tsunade said, rolling her eyes at his complaints. Jiraiya frowned. You think that guy's dead out there somewhere? Tsunade glared at him. Even if someone's going to die, it won't be him. Jiraiya let out a loud laugh. Haha, just kidding. He's stronger than me, so I'm sure he's fine. Then, turning more thoughtful, he added, the old man's been in contact with him, right? Tsunade sighed. Yeah, but only through coded messages. Orochimaru said he's searching for some kind of medicinal herb. Who knows what kind of research he's up to this time? Jiraiya crossed his arms, looking suspicious. Bet he's working on some weird experiment again. Something the village definitely wouldn't want to know about. Tsunade shot him a sharp look. Shut up. Don't go spreading rumors like that. The last thing we need is for people to start thinking Orochimaru's up to something shady. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Oh, I see. Still just Orochimaru this, Orochimaru that, all day long, huh? Well, of course. Tsunade snapped. He's my boyfriend. Jiraiya's eyes widened in disbelief. Boyfriend? Please. You two haven't even done anything yet. For all you know, Orochimaru's out there hooking up with some random girl right now. He didn't get to finish that. Seeing Tsunade's fist clenching and the dangerous glint in her eyes, Jiraiya quickly shut his mouth. Go on. Why aren't you talking? Keep going, she said with a threatening smile. Ahem, never mind. Forget I said anything. Jiraiya forced a nervous laugh, raising his hands in surrender. He knew better than to push his luck. Getting pummeled by Tsunade just before heading off to battle wasn't on his agenda. At that moment, the third Hokage approached, wearing his battle robes. Are you ready to leave? Hiruzen asked, his tone all business. Yeah, we're good to go, Jiraiya replied. But are the two of us enough for this? There's no other choice right now, Hiruzen said with a nod. You two will go ahead. Orochimaru and Tsunade will also be on the front line soon, handling things on their own until you return. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, but then smirked. Orochimaru, huh? Haha, I'm sure he'll be fine. Meanwhile, outside Konoha village, Orochimaru was strolling back toward the gates, hands tucked casually into his pockets, a large scroll strapped to his back. He had spent nearly 2 years away from the village, focusing on his experiments and projects in the land of rice fields. His latest success had been unlocking a new section of his system, Daily Life Technology, a reward for completing 3 advanced weapons technologies. But daily life innovations didn't interest him much. For someone like Orochimaru, who was constantly seeking ways to increase his power and knowledge, such things were a mere distraction. Still, he made note of the developments, more out of curiosity than need. As he neared the village gates, he paused, noticing the many footprints in the dirt. Looks like I came back a little late. Orochimaru murmured to himself, realizing that the village had already mobilized its forces. His recent contact with Hiruzen had been through coded messages left at specific locations. He hadn't expected such a sudden call back to the village. Now it seemed the third Hokage had run out of options. Just as Orochimaru stepped through the gates, he was immediately tackled by a familiar presence. Tsunade. Without hesitation, Tsunade threw herself into Orochimaru's arms, ignoring the eyes of the villagers around them. She hugged him tightly, uncaring of the stares and whispers. Orochimaru chuckled softly, returning the embrace, though more composed than Tsunade. The third Hokage, standing nearby, could only shake his head. Tsunade and Orochimaru's relationship had been established early on, and no one could do anything about it, not even the Hokage himself. It had simply become something people had learned to accept. Orochimaru smiled, enjoying the warmth of Tsunade's embrace. It's been a long time, Tsunade. I must say, you seem even more beautiful now. Hee hee, of course. Tsunade grinned, snuggling closer to him. Orochimaru gently patted her back. Though I'd love to catch up more, I should check in with Sensei first. Tsunade nodded obediently but didn't let go of his hand. She held on tight as they approached the third Hokage, as if afraid Orochimaru might vanish again if she let go. Orochimaru, Hiruzen greeted with a smile. Sensei, Orochimaru responded with a respectful nod. I apologize for pulling you back so abruptly. The situation has gotten complicated. I understand, Orochimaru said, cutting straight to the point. What's our mission this time? Hiruzen sighed. There's no specific mission. Now that you're back, the 3 of you will head directly to the front lines. You'll be in charge of pushing back the enemy forces. The other families will support you, but the war will be in your hands. Here, he handed over a scroll, are the details of the enemy's 3 offensive lines. Got it. Orochimaru took the scroll and glanced at it before tucking it away. Leave it to us. Tsunade squeezed his hand, her face determined. Let's go, Jiraiya. Jiraiya, adjusting his headband, gave a lopsided grin. You're still as cocky as ever, Orochimaru. Orochimaru smirked. And you're still as annoying. Chapter 119, Orochimaru, when did you start carrying that scroll around? Deep in the forest, Jiraiya, running beside Orochimaru, finally voiced his curiosity. The large scroll strapped to Orochimaru's back was nearly identical in size to Jiraiya's own, and it had been bothering him since Orochimaru returned to the village. Tsunade, running ahead of them, also chimed in, Yeah, I've never seen you with a scroll that big before. What's in it? Orochimaru glanced back, a faint smile on his lips. This scroll contains strategic materials that will help us turn the tide of the war. Strategic materials? Jiraiya frowned, confused. What do you mean, strategic materials? And don't tell me this was part of your whole medicinal herb search. You've been lying, haven't you? Orochimaru chuckled. Not a lie, Jiraiya. Just a little misdirection. I happened to come across some very useful technology during my time away, and I've been refining it. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you just come back to the village to work on it? There wasn't enough time, Orochimaru replied. Plus, this technology belongs to another party. I've been working on improving it from its original form, so I didn't want to return until I'd made significant progress. Jiraiya let out a long whistle. Man, you're always into something crazy. So, what is it this time? Another experimental potion? That gene-enhancing fluid you came up with last time helped a lot of people, me included. Orochimaru nodded. It's a bit more advanced than that. Of course it is, Jiraiya said with a grin. Hey, can we take a peek at what you've got in there? Tsunade's curiosity was piqued as well, and she leaned in slightly. Yeah, give us a look. Orochimaru just smiled, shaking his head. You'll see it when the time is right. Lord Orochimaru, you're finally here. At the border of the Land of Fire, Konoha's temporary military base was bustling with activity. Large tents dotted the area, and groups of ninjas were hurriedly preparing for the coming battle. Naruto, the temporary commander of the front lines, breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya approach. He quickly gave the order to prepare for a pre-war meeting. As Orochimaru and the others walked through the camp, they noticed representatives from all the major clans present, including Hatake Tsukumo, the White Fang, who was geared up for battle. Inside the command tent, Orochimaru took a seat alongside the other clan leaders, and they quickly began exchanging information. What's the situation? Orochimaru asked, his tone businesslike. Hakushu stood and gave his report. Sirs, based on the intel we've gathered over the last few days, the weather in Amagakure has had a significant impact on our forces. The rain is constant, which limits the effectiveness of our fire-style techniques. Meanwhile, Suna has deployed its puppet troops, making the situation even more difficult for us. Orochimaru leaned forward, fingers steepled. The puppet army, huh? Hakushu nodded grimly. Yes. The Sand Ninjas have been using their puppet forces to inflict heavy losses on us. If we're to stand a chance, we need a strategy to neutralize their puppets. Orochimaru considered this for a moment. Puppets were a known problem on the battlefield, especially in large-scale skirmishes. Puppet masters could stay at a distance, manipulating their deadly tools with little risk to themselves. Poison gas, hidden blades, and needles made them deadly in close combat, which meant fighting them up close was often a death sentence. Ninjas who specialized in taijutsu, like the Hyuga clan, were especially at risk. The leader of the Hyuga clan, Hayashi's father, was the first to speak up. My clan's techniques are largely useless against the puppet troops. We rely heavily on close combat, and with the poison and hidden weapons in those puppets, we can't risk it. Orochimaru nodded in agreement. Yes, sending taijutsu specialists against the puppet army would be a mistake. The risk of being poisoned or overwhelmed by the puppet's traps is too high. The head of the Inuzuka clan, who relied on close-quarters combat alongside his nindogs, spoke next. Our clan is in the same boat. Sending our people against puppets would only end in disaster. We can assist with tracking and recon, but direct combat against puppets isn't feasible. Orochimaru turned his gaze to Tsunade. In that case, Tsunade, I'll leave the detoxification efforts to you. Of course, Tsunade said confidently. I'll make sure our forces are prepared to handle any poison the Sand Ninja throw at us. Next, Orochimaru turned to the Uchiha clan leader. How many Uchiha have been deployed? The clan leader, a stern man in his mid-30s, replied, We've sent around 200 ninjas. How many have awakened the Sharingan? Orochimaru asked. The clan leader hesitated slightly. Only about 20. That's more than enough, Orochimaru said calmly, his eyes glinting with a plan. The Uchiha clan will be responsible for neutralizing the puppet troops. What? The Uchiha clan leader looked startled. You're joking, right? How are 20 Sharingan users supposed to handle an entire puppet army? Chapter 120, Orochimaru, are you kidding me? The outburst came from Uchiha Dan, a young Uchiha who had been holding a grudge against Orochimaru ever since their encounter in the Forest of Death. After Orochimaru became a Chunin, he had been elusive, and their paths rarely crossed. Now, as tensions escalated during the war, and with Orochimaru temporarily in command alongside Jiraiya and Tsunade, Uchiha Dan couldn't help but feel that Orochimaru's orders were intended to put the Uchiha clan at a disadvantage. It wasn't just paranoia. Orochimaru had assigned the Uchiha clan, with their Sharingan, to counter the Saiyan ninjas' puppet army ninjas who excelled at medium to long-range combat, which was a suitable role for the Uchiha. Their fire-style jutsu was particularly effective against wind-style, a common technique of the Saiyan ninjas. On the surface, it looked like the perfect match. But Uchiha Dan saw it differently. The rain-soaked environment of Amagakure greatly weakened fire-style techniques, and the enemy's puppet army was equipped with poisonous needles that were difficult to avoid, even with the Sharingan. Moreover, they had no idea how many puppet troops they were up against. Expecting a few dozen Uchiha to take on the full force of the enemy's puppets seemed like madness. Before Orochimaru could respond, another voice spoke up, calm and composed. Brother Dan, let Orochimaru-sama finish explaining. Uchiha Fugaku, standing next to the clan leader, addressed Uchiha Dan with a stern expression. This is a battlefield. Don't jump to conclusions before the full strategy is revealed. Even the Uchiha clan leader, maintaining his composure, added in a cold tone, Dan, this is not the time to question orders without listening. Uchiha Dan clenched his fists but nodded in compliance. Yes, I understand. Orochimaru's eyes settled on Fugaku, the young man beside the clan leader, before turning to Dan with a smirk. Some people become arrogant too quickly after reaching Jounin rank. You should learn from the brothers next to you, Dan. I'm not sure how you even made it to Jounin in the first place. Uchiha Dan's face turned red with anger, but a sharp look from the clan leader silenced him before he could respond. Ignoring Dan's temper, Orochimaru continued, enough nonsense. Here's the plan. We'll proceed with the previous battle formations for the main forces, but I'm keeping the Uchiha clan members with Sharingan at the 2-tomo level and above. As for the Inuzuka, Hyuga, and Aburame clans, leave 2 members from each to support the operation. The rest of the ninjas will remain under Narahakushu's command, but each team must include sensory ninjas. If you encounter puppet troops, do not engage head-on, withdraw immediately. Understood, the various clan representatives responded in unison. Oh, and Sakumo, Orochimaru added, turning to Ataki Sakumo, your team will stay as well. Of course, Sakumo agreed, his calm demeanor unchanged. With Orochimaru's orders set, the remaining forces were placed under Narahakushu's control, while the selected team members stayed behind to carry out Orochimaru's plan. The Uchiha clan members present included Uchiha Fugaku, Uchiha En, Uchiha Setsuna, and several others. In total, there were 16 Uchiha with Sharingan above the 2-tomo level. Orochimaru glanced over the group. 16 Uchiha, all with at least 2 tomo. Good. Now, who's your commanding officer for this battle? Uchiha Fugaku stepped forward, his expression calm and composed. That would be me, Lord Orochimaru. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow, mildly surprised. He had expected Uchiha Dan to be in charge, given his rank, but it seemed that Fugaku, though younger, was the one with authority. And your name? Orochimaru asked, though he already had an idea. Uchiha Fugaku, the young man replied. Orochimaru's eyes gleamed with recognition. So this is Uchiha Fugaku, the father of Itachi and Sasuke. Orochimaru thought to himself. He hadn't paid much attention to Fugaku before, but now that he saw him up close, it was clear this young man had a commanding presence. It was well known that Uchiha Fugaku would later become the leader of the Uchiha clan, and Orochimaru knew that Fugaku's strength shouldn't be underestimated. After all, Itachi and Sasuke inherited their remarkable abilities from somewhere, and Orochimaru suspected that Fugaku's talents ran much deeper than most people realized. Orochimaru's gaze lingered on Fugaku for a moment before speaking. "Very well. You'll be leading the Uchiha contingent. Let's begin." Fugaku's expression didn't change, but he felt the weight of Orochimaru's gaze. He had heard many stories about the Sannin, especially from Uchiha Dan and Uchiha Setsuna, both of whom had grudges against Orochimaru. But Fugaku was different. He admired strength and discipline, and although he had his own reservations, he understood that Orochimaru had earned his place as a commander. "Lord Orochimaru, what's the plan?" Fugaku asked, eager to hear the strategy. Orochimaru smiled. "I'm glad you asked. We're going to form a specialized sniper team. Your Uchiha will be the key to taking down the enemy's puppet masters." Fugaku blinked in surprise. "A sniper team? You intend to have us snipe puppet masters?" "Yes," Orochimaru said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Puppet masters control their puppets using chakra threads. The Sharingan can easily track those threads, giving you the perfect opportunity to sever them. Once the threads are cut, the puppets will be useless. But with only 16 Uchiha and a few other support ninjas, won't we be exposed?" Fugaku questioned. "If the enemy realizes what we're doing, they'll send reinforcements to surround us." Orochimaru nodded. "That's why I'll be providing you with a special set of ninja tools to help you deal with any potential counterattacks." "Ninja tools?" Fugaku's confusion deepened, and even Hatake Tsukumo and Jiraiya, standing nearby, looked intrigued. Orochimaru didn't elaborate. Instead, he reached into his cloak and produced a scroll. With a quick hand sign, he unsealed the contents. Bang! A puff of white smoke filled the air, and when it cleared, a large, specialized box stood before the group. "Activate your Sharingan and watch closely," Orochimaru said, his voice commanding. "I'll only demonstrate this once." That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 7. Peace.